All right, you guys, it is Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni Day. Finally. I've been teasing that all week. And let me just say to all the women out there that are watching, no matter what you do in life, you never, ever, ever go full Amber Heard.
Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds asking for a protective order against Justin Baldoni is the equivalent of a bully complaining to the teacher that you hit back when you're struck. Don't pick fights if you are afraid to get hit. Hashtag Team Justin Baldoni. If Baldoni settles, I'm gonna be pissed. Stand your ground and take it all the way. Blake Lively need to pay. I'll just say this. The real Candace, though, didn't just give us all the tea with the Blake Lively-Justin Baldoni lawsuit. She gave the teacups and pot. Blake Lively, girl, we know. The way you co-op the movie, got him written off the posters, forced producer credit, tormented the crew, got people fired, took over editing, and put Justin Baldoni in the basement is not normal behavior. Surprising is how long you got away with it. What really pissed me off about the Justin Baldoni case is how he was fired, dropped by his agency, and stripped of his awards within 24 hours of the accusations, without any proof or a chance to defend himself. Where was that energy with Lizzo? In my opinion, if Justin Baldoni did run a smear campaign, I wouldn't care. Blake Lively took his movie from him, made it like it's her directorial debut, and mocked victims with alcohol and hair care products. Then she lied to the public with edited text messages and an NYT spread. Facts. She is a fucking thief, a coward, and a liar. She has no regard for anyone but herself. I didn't think anyone would top Amber Heard, but her emotional blackmail is worse than the bed shitter. Trolls charge in here like they are Blake Lively or Ryan Reynolds, and I'm Justin Baldoni or Brian Friedman. Like, bish, who do you think I am? What about my account screams power to you? I'm just not easily fooled as you. I can see logic and deception. Hashtag Team Justin Baldoni. Yeah, you're a real logic detector, alright? I would love to see people start apologizing first. Imagine it starts like this. Blake Lively publicly apologizes to Justin Baldoni, confesses her wrongdoing, and that in knowing better, she will do better. The whole world starts apologizing, repenting, and forgiving becomes cool instead of dying for one's pride. Let's just keep going, guys. We'll get through it. She stole the movie from Baldoni. What an idiot, immature, not a good actress. Embarrassing for real survivors. Amber Heard, twin sister. She didn't read the book, but sold alcohol and hairline. Dummy of the century. Hashtag it ends with us. Hashtag Blake Lively. Hashtag Ryan Reynolds. Hashtag lawsuit. Hashtag karma. Oh no, not alcohol and hairline. I'm not going to rub it in every troll's face when Justin Baldoni defeats Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. I've made a piñata for each of you. When he wins, I'm going to live stream me knocking the candy out of you while I drink aviation gin and Betty booze. But it's a domestic violence movie, and you drinking alcohol to celebrate Justin's win is very disrespectful to domestic violence victims. Blake Lively bullied her way into taking over Justin Baldoni's movie. She was so tone-deaf about the subject matter of the book that during the press, she acted like the film was a rom-com. She promoted hair and alcohol products in her husband's film in which they attempted to destroy Justin through ridicule, not realizing that the followers of the book love Justin, and could not understand why he was pushed out of his movie. That was the cause of her bad press. Yes, that was the cause. Never forget Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds forced Justin Baldoni and his family into a basement to watch his movie. That's a level of evil I can't understand. The classic high school bullying method. Acting like you totally click with your bestie right in front of the third wheel to make them feel as excluded and ostracized and rejected as possible. They literally pretended the interviewer doesn't exist. This is just like 101 high school bullying tactic. If these two women can do this on a professional reporter in front of a camera that is filming them, imagine how they would treat other professional staff and ordinary people without cameras. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Don't you dare bring Maya Angelou into this. What the fuck is wrong with you? Blake Lively shows us exactly who she is here. I now have zero respect for her. Mean girl behavior. Avoiding eye contact, shutting her out of the conversation, then the eye roll at the end. I'll never see Blake Lively the same again. This gave me flashbacks to how I was bullied in high school. It's a weird type of bullying where you're constantly put down and ignored. Props to the interviewer for keeping it cool. Yeah, she's real cool. She posted an interview from like 10 years ago because an actress was a little rude to her when she asked a dumbass question. So cool. She's the coolest. Hell, she's ice cold if you ask me. The interviewer almost quit her job over the treatment by these two. I'm glad she didn't. Well, I'm sad she didn't, personally. I love how the interviewer never forgot this moment and patiently waited until it was the right time to drop this. Wow. Interesting. For me, when it's any woman from Hollywood, and I'm talking more recent, not back when Dorothy was being drugged to stay awake, but as a person who went through hell, I have a huge problem believing any of these women. First, my biggest reason was after the Amber Heard case. It scarred me how this woman tried to be the face of sexual abuse. When Blake first came forward, I already knew it was bullshit. Once again, another Hollywood elite who was trying to be the face of the Me Too movement. But unlike Amber, and from hearing Justin's apology recording, I think Blake truly envisions she is the victim. Supposedly, a list of other previous directors and coworkers sexually harassed her, which to me sparks red flags. It's like the girl who cried wolf. And maybe she has projected any type of male interaction as sexual harassment. I also believe she pushed bots in the media against Anna Kendrick after A Simple Favor came out. If you go on Reddit forums about Anna and directly after filming that movie, all of a sudden she was swarmed with so much hostility, which previously I had never heard anything bad on her. Honestly, I wasn't trying to read into this whole lawsuit, but as a previous victim of abuse, it really grinds my gears, since BL and RR will most likely be fine, and Justin Baldoni will have a tarnished career. I really hope that the people will continue to come together to push the right narrative, and Hollywood will give this man a chance to regain what he's worked hard for. Women can lie, and it just happens a lot more than people want to realize. As someone who was essayed as a child by a man, I still do not subscribe to this feminist belief of believe all women, regardless of absolutely no evidence or even evidence to the contrary. No, women can be just as awful as a man, if not worse. Whoa, have you guys heard this? Women lie, apparently. Shit, you guys, my worldview has been completely shattered. I've never heard a single soul say that before. Give that Redditor an award for exposing the truth. To be able to change your opinion on such a difficult subject after being a survivor of SA yourself is amazing. Blake Lively's behavior is vile. In the video, you can clearly see how she deeply twisted something into SH when it wasn't. I'm shocked that there's women who would make light of SH, use it to their own personal gain, and do so publicly. And I imagine that's why a lot of people are choosing to speak up, because it isn't a clear-cut case as it would initially seem. LOL, did anyone actually watch the clip? She caught feelings for him hard and was flirting with him. This whole charade is either he deflecting or Ryan Reynolds is behind it all because her attraction to her co-star has hurt his ego. I'm also a survivor. It was 22 years ago in November and I still have nightmares, both about the assault itself and then the response. So yes, our first instinct is to believe the victim. I too believed BL despite the history of their respective characters. You can tell a tree by the fruit it bears when she released the NYT article. Of course I did. The allegations were appalling, but as I sat with it for about a week, something was just off to me. I couldn't shake this instinct that the victim my gut was telling me to support was JB, but I didn't. I took the approach of I'm holding space for her and want to hear what she has to say about this, but I'm going to reserve my crucifixion of JB until she provides proof. But then he started to provide proof. I felt weirdly triggered, like women like this are the reason I wasn't believed. I never got justice, and I was going to keep happening to other women, and I feel very protective of those women. I deleted a lot of my comments supporting her, but I remember saying something like I hope she is very careful here, because it's so high profile that how she handles this will impact women everywhere. Well, here we are. It's okay to change your mind as your opinion becomes more informed. Although I'm confident this will not be the case, should BL unwisely be holding out on exposing her smoking gun, and my opinion would change as well. But each day, more comes to light that proves she is being dishonest. And granted, this is the court of public opinion, but I believe standard jury instructions should still apply. And where witness credibility is concerned, she has proved herself uncredible. As for BL supporters, well, we're all shouted down because we're misogynistic, have internalized misogyny. So I found it's best just to not engage, because they are not ready to listen to facts or reason. But I love that this is a safe space for all views overall, and I think JB would want it that way. Sending love. So at the beginning of this video, we talked about Tracy Flick, a fictional character from the 1990 film Election. Tracy Flick, who was in a way a satirical personification of Hillary Clinton. Despite the fact that they both are shady in their own regard and both are deserving of criticism, and the fact that yes, Hillary has worked in the White House, Bill Clinton is the one who got to be president. Therefore has always had more power than Hillary Clinton has ever had. Bill Clinton is known to be unfaithful to his wife on numerous occasions, has been accused multiple times of sexual harassment and assault, admitted to having an affair with an intern in the White House after lying about it initially, and allegedly, I guess, spent time on the Lolita Express and on Jeffrey Epstein's Predator Island. But Hillary Clinton is the devil. Hillary is mocked for being boring and stale and ugly and for wearing pantsuits as if Bill Clinton is George Clooney or something. And what's frustrating is that me saying that will send people flying to their keyboards to say that I'm just just defending her because she's a woman, and frankly, yeah, that is what I'm doing, because her being a woman is not irrelevant here. Tracy Flick was an unambiguous victim of sexual assault and grooming, yet that's rarely what is brought up when people talk about this movie. The lead character in My Dark Vanessa is not a likable person. In fact, she's very troubled. She's a victim blamer who has mixed feelings over the Me Too movement because she did not see her relationship with her teacher as a form of rape or coercion. You hear her admit to enjoying the power she believes she has over these creepy older men who are preying on her. The book explores how people who have experienced this kind of trauma can create their own revisionist history and declare that they are not a victim. You saw this with Billy Falau, who was groomed and assaulted by Mary Kay Letourneau in the late 1990s when she was 34 and he was 12 fucking years old. They would go on to get married in 2005 when Mary was released from prison. Billy did not see himself as a victim, and while the public didn't either. Our understanding of victimhood and what we feel counts as true victimhood status is how people like Billy or Vanessa are unable to understand how they were manipulated and taken advantage of by a trusted adult, an adult who they possibly looked up to and felt seen by. Although there have always been a small group of people, mainly women and feminists, who have always tried sounding the alarm in situations where the public seems to not understand that something sinister and predatory is happening, like with R. Kelly, it was only until recently that we began to condemn not just age gap relationships, but underage gap relationships. The reason I know that is because back when Demi Lovato's Simply Complicated documentary came out in 2017, where she openly admitted that she met Wilmer Valderrama when she was 17 and he was 29, and literally states that when she turned 18, they began dating.
When I first met Wilmer, he was 29. I was in hair and makeup and he came and sat down and I was like, I love this man and I have to have him. But I was only 17. After I had turned 18, we began dating.
No one at the time, or at least not enough people at the time, said anything about this. And even if some people did raise concerns, that was not the main talking point when this documentary came out. Somewhat understandably, because the doc is mostly about her substance abuse and history with EDs, but still, it wasn't until she wrote 29 in 2022 that people realized, oh yeah, that was kind of weird. For years, people thought they were the cutest couple, and when they broke up, the fandom was sad about it. We talked briefly about the ways social mores and ethics change over time, or mutate over time, more like. You see this when it comes to infidelity and cheating scandals. And yes, I know I just got done criticizing Joss Whedon and Bill Clinton for being cheaters, but here's the thing. Aside from some sacrificial lambs like the dude from the Try Guys or Tiger Woods, men are not usually chastised by society for cheating on their partners. There's a reason that article Kai Cole wrote about Joss Whedon being a cheater didn't immediately blow up his world in the way it would have for her had Joss wrote that about her instead. When men like Bill Clinton, for example, cheat, people are quick to say, well, we can't cancel a man for cheating. That's not assault. Who amongst us hasn't cheated? Meanwhile, they will happily slut shame and chastise the other woman or the woman who cheated. I remember a while back some people on the internet saying that it is unfair to scold the other woman because the man is the one who cheated. This was seen as somewhat radical because it was a response to the homewrecker narrative that has always lingered in our society. The other woman being blamed for the destruction of a family and not the husband who chose to cheat on his wife. At some point, women began discussing how actually participating in infidelity is just as bad as a person who is being unfaithful. You're helping this man cheat. He can only cheat if another woman is willing, right? Well, not exactly. There are women who willingly enter into affairs with men that they know are married. There are women who actively pursue men that they know are in relationships. And yes, all of those things are bad on the surface, but they are not always the full story. Contrary to popular opinion, but it is actually men who lie a lot, and Bell Hooks talks about this too, especially in situations where they are cheating. Sometimes men lie about the state of their relationship with their wife or partner. They might say that they're separated or taking a break in order to get this person to cheat with them. Or they'll say they're in an open relationship and their wife is cool with it. People are so focused on the woman who is being cheated on as if she's the only person being lied to or manipulated. We have decided that no, women are just as culpable in cheating situations as the man who is in a committed relationship. We can now use this new moral to further shame and exercise our hatred of women. Because if a woman has done something bad, then it's okay to be misogynistic. There are so many men who also pursue women who are in relationships. There are men who cheat with women who are in relationships, but you never hear about the other man. You never hear people dragging a man through the mud for messing around with a married woman, because in that case, the woman is the one meant to take sole responsibility. Men who sleep with married women or women in committed relationships are not referred to as mistresses. I don't even know if there's a word to describe men who do this, and even if there was, it doesn't matter because we don't use it. Now, part of why some people hate the other woman is because they see them as gender traitors, violating girl code. They see them as enabling shitty male behavior and not looking out for other women, and I get that. Again, I don't think it's right to mess around with married men, but I will never be more critical towards the other woman than the man who cheated, and I will never agree with the concept of publicly shaming the other woman as some form of justice. We do that instead and focus on how the men can redeem themselves, or shaming their partner into forgiving him for the kids. With women, redemption is never a question. With women, once you've done something wrong or some perceived wrong, it is guilty until proven innocent. In like 30 years when 2 millennials decide to rehash it on a podcast. All of this begs the question, who gets to be a victim? Who is deserving of our empathy and compassion, and why is likability so powerful that it prevents us from empathizing with people who have been traumatized and or disproportionately dragged for being the side piece? It's unclear and has always been a little unclear. To a disturbing amount of people in our society, being a victim comes with rules and tenets. It comes with stipulations. And if you don't meet them, your victimhood status will be snatched away from you. But because, like I said, these rules and stipulations are unclear, it is also hard to know which people we would decide are victims and which ones are not. When our moral compasses are constantly shifting as time progresses, our understanding of what can count as victimization is ever changing.
The thing is, like, we always do this, where we look back on the way we treated, especially women in the public eye. We did this with Britney Spears. We did this with Janet Jackson and the Super Bowl, Tanya Harding in the 90s. We absolutely harassed these women. And then after we've harassed them and after we've transformed their lives for the worse, we look back and we go, yeah, that was wrong. And when these comparisons are made, when people are like, when comparisons between Amber Heard and like Britney Spears, for example, are made, there are Johnny Depp supporters or people who, don't support Amber Heard will be like, yeah, well, the difference is like Britney Spears was actually a victim and also like she wasn't an abuser. Like Amber Heard was an abuser. And so that's why all this is justified. But if you look at what people were saying about Britney Spears at the time when the public was abusing her, it was the same shit in the fact that like people made these grand moral proclamations about like why their harassment of her was not only justified, but like righteous.
In her incredible 2007 book, The Cult of True Victimhood, From the War on Welfare to the War on Terror by Ellison M. Cole, she brilliantly analyzes our society's collective hatred and disdain of victims and victimhood and describes what she calls the cult of true victimhood. With one hand, anti-victimists strive to knock victims off their holy mantle. They forge victimhood or victimism as a subject position and then target it for ridicule. With the other hand, however, they place victims on an even higher pedestal by advancing what I call the cult of true victimhood. In this way, anti-victim discourse goes beyond the ambiguity of counter-subversive splitting and mirroring, for its practitioners reify and exalt the very status they revile. True victimhood is defined in opposition to victimism. The victim is true because the victimist is evidently a bogus victim. However, contrasting victims and victimists has less to do with the veracity of petitions or the facts of injury than with the sufferer's personal qualities, which may be classified according to the following categories: propriety, responsibility, individuality, and innocence. Propriety. The true victim is a noble victim. He endures his suffering with dignity, refraining from complaining or other public displays of weakness. Responsibility. The true victim commands his fate. He does not exploit his injury to excuse his failures. He assumes victimhood reluctantly, or even better, rejects the status altogether. Individuality. Victimhood is an individual status even when a group is injured collectively. A true victim is not a victim by affiliation or by engaging in victim politics. Victimization must be immediate and concrete. Innocence. This is the most important virtue of true victimhood. Anti-victimists apply the category of innocence in two distinct ways. First, with respect to his victimization, the victim's innocence must be complete and incontrovertible. True victims have not contributed to their injury in any way. Second, the victim is morally upright. He must be pure. This totalizing conception of innocence encompasses every facet of the true victim's character. This mindset is a core component of rape culture. Women who have experienced sexual assault are usually blamed for what they were wearing, whether they left their drink unattended, going into a man's home whom they've just met, not fighting back hard enough, not coming forward soon enough, being so foolish as to go out alone at night. Once you are seen as having been foolish or aiding and abetting in your own demise, sympathy goes out the window. Your victimhood is too murky for us, and so you can't be a victim. This mindset is prevalent in abuse cases like the Menendez brothers or Lorena Bobbitt. We expect people to rise above their trauma, so when people like Lorena and the Menendez brothers respond to their abusers by killing them or castrating them, their victimhood is now debatable. You can't be a victim and a murderer. You can't be a victim and a person who castrates men. A good victim is one who doesn't let their trauma get the best of them. A good domestic violence victim is one who takes her beatings like a champ and manages to escape without hurting anyone. And yes, that does mean that you must make sure to not ever fight back, because even though we use that to blame rape victims, fighting back in an abusive relationship will get you labeled as an abuser. Better yet, if you really want to be a good victim, get killed, because that's one of the best ways to ensure a status as a victim, unless you're, black or something. Because now it's clear. And it's black and white. Murder is bad. Someone being murdered is sad. The murdered party can't speak for themselves anymore. Therefore, unambiguous victim. This mindset, while harmful to victims, benefits perpetrators in the opposite direction. Once someone who is being accused of being bad or has been proven in a court of law of being bad and has been revealed that they were a victim of some form of abuse, all of their wrongdoings dissipate. Not even just dissipate, but are refuted as if they were wrong all along. You can't have been a victim of child sex abuse and be an abuser. Even though we talk all the time about the cycle of abuse when it comes to our parents and our family, there's just no way you can be a victim and a victimizer. No way. Victimhood is meant to be uncomplicated. Two things are not meant to be true at the same time. Only one thing can be true at a time. With Drake Bell, he's either a predator or a victim of child sex abuse. He can't be both because that's too complicated. That's too much to unpack or understand. It's easier to believe that he was completely and utterly wronged by the legal system, because in order for us to empathize with his trauma that Brian Peck inflicted on him, he can no longer be someone who did something bad. He is now someone who was wrongly accused of doing something bad, even if he pled guilty to what he did, even if he has lied about what he pled guilty to and has participated in smearing his victims, even if there's mountains of evidence of him constantly flirting with underage girls. Doesn't matter. Like Allison M. said, anti-victimists end up reifying the very thing about victimization that they claim to hate. Now, some of you may say, but no, what about Lorena Bobbitt? Well, Lorena is a woman and a woman of color, and being a woman alone makes it even harder to achieve the status of true victimhood. Her trauma, for a lot of men, was not enough to justify castrating her husband. Being stripped of victimhood can be used to justify your murder, like when an unarmed black child who was no angel is killed by a police officer. Race plays a huge factor in the cult of true victimhood, as people of color, and especially black women, are rarely seen as victims. Some people have theorized that victim blaming stems from a result of what they call the just world fallacy, a phenomenon in which people feel that the world is inherently fair and just, and that whatever bad thing happens to a person is their own fault. They must have been a bad person, or they must have been stupid or weak. I remember working as a housekeeper in a hospital over a year ago. This hospital was full of sick, elderly people who some never had visitors and spent most of their time in a hospital bed. I remember a male coworker who'd been working there a lot longer than me told me some of the patients' backstories. To my surprise, some of these people were sex offenders. Some were abusers, some were racist or sexist. Some didn't get visitors because they burned all their bridges with anyone who could have cared about them. And he concluded that those patients deserved to be in this stinky, pissy hospital. It was their karma. He said it as if it was his way of relieving himself of having to feel any kind of empathy for them. Now I can comfortably work in this hellhole, pretending like these people deserve to be here, so that the neglectful treatment they receive doesn't weigh so hard on my conscience. A great many of us truly believe that that is how the world works. Good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. Who amongst us hasn't uttered the phrase, "what goes around comes around"? I know I have. Even though I know it's not true, there's a part of me that wants to believe that people who deliberately hurt people and abuse power dynamics and whatnot will get what's coming to them. But believing that requires me to also think that good things always happen to good people, when I for sure know that that's not true. Also, what constitutes as a good person? Well, turns out anti-victimists have rules and tenets for that too. And the minute they decide you are not likable enough to even be believed, when you express that you've been harmed, you will be seen as a bad person. In fact, you'll be seen even worse because you are now presenting yourself as a victim of something. And we hate victims. So if you're not a perfectly perfect victim, and your victimizer isn't unlikable enough for us to hate him, or if the details of what happened to you scream to us as not that bad, that hatred will intensify to the point that these alleged victims are punished to a much greater degree than their alleged predators. Anti-victimists love to say that it's false blank accusations that make it hard for the real victims to come forward. The issue is that whenever someone does come forward and claims to be a victim, you say that pretty much every time. It's hard to know who would be considered a real victim to you, since you seem to have this knee-jerk response of instantly disbelieving victims routinely.
But she could have lied about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it would have made her like a reasonably shitty person, but it would not have made her any less of a victim of abuse.
Absolutely. And like, I want people to really think about it and like think to yourself, put yourself in the shoes of a predator. If you are a predator and you are seeking out someone to abuse, you are going to seek out vulnerabilities, different types of vulnerabilities. You're going to seek out ways that will make someone easy to be manipulated. And you'll also seek out ways to discredit people after the fact. Abusers specifically seek out people who they know aren't going to be believed. It's all part of the cycle of abuse. And just because somebody is a criminal, a liar, mentally ill, an abuser themselves, none of that disqualifies you from being a victim. In fact, people who are mentally ill are more likely to be victimized because of this reason.
I think this brings us to the myth of the perfect victim, because Amber Heard, after enduring years of abuse, behaved in ways, emotionally, verbally, physically, in ways that I think most people would disagree with, in ways that were cruel, in ways that I'm sure she regrets. But that's also like the case for a surprising amount of domestic abuse victims.
Exactly.
And that's not a reality that I think we're willing to accept. Like, we want victims to be completely like docile and have a clean slate and be, this quote unquote perfect victim who has never done anything wrong. And if you claim to be, and this is what I kind of feel when I look at the way the internet behaved and the public behaved, a lot of people who say that they support victims but did not support Amber Heard because she was not the type of victim that they would like to support. If you're waiting for that person to support, you're never going to find them.
Exactly.
And you don't support victims.
Exactly.
Anti-victimists are very predictable, extremely hypocritical, and contradict themselves at every turn. First, they claim that the whole believe women thing is bullshit and that it's wrong to blindly believe someone who claims to be a victim. Firstly, why is it bad to blindly believe a victim? I suppose if, say, the person is genuinely lying and it was actually prosecuted, which almost never happens, it would be harmful to the person being accused, but historically speaking, that's not something men especially need to worry about. Rape accusations alone are rarely prosecuted, so even if people did falsely allege rape, men are not going to prison because of false rape accusations. They're not even going to prison for rape accusations that turn out to be true. There has rarely been a time where people did not side with a man being accused of rape or assault by a woman. The same people who get mad about believe women are the same ones instantly and blindly believing the man who is being accused.
Is once the opposing party comes out with their own narrative, like once Blake Lively filed this complaint, people started to say, this is complicated. I don't know how I feel about this anymore because new information is coming to light. But the correct thing to do is to draw that conclusion before we get to this point. If you think it's too complicated now, then why were you weighing in before? I think oftentimes there's a response to a woman bringing forward allegations where people say we need to wait for the other side. But did you wait for the other side the first time you weighed in? Did you wait for Blake Lively's side when all of this was happening over the summer? Or did you just rush ahead and take part in this without really knowing what was going on? I think if people really want to have all of the information before they take a stance, then they need to consistently do that, regardless of whether the person being attacked is someone who they feel is right or someone who they feel is wrong.
Since false accusations are rare and victims rarely benefit from coming forward, period, blindly believing and supporting victims is not nearly as bad as blindly disbelieving them. It does not carry the same weight or harm, and I wish people would stop acting like it does. People act like it would be the downfall of society if we uplift people who we think are lying about rape, and we claim that it's just our concern for the real victims. Anti-victimists say innocent until proven guilty, and don't like how some of these men have lost jobs due to allegations when nothing has been officially proven in court. But as usual, it's interesting how anti-victimists will say this, but will definitively say that they think their alleged victims are liars. They are guilty of lying until proven innocent, and their innocence is almost never proven in their eyes. They say innocent until proven guilty, but in the case of Megan Thee Stallion or Cheryl Arujo, who did win their court cases against the men who assaulted them, still were punished, blamed, and disbelieved. Cheryl Arujo, who was the inspiration for the movie The Accused, starring Jodie Foster, was gang assaulted by 4 men at a bar in 1983 while several other men stood by and cheered them on. All of these men were convicted, and yet Cheryl was alienated from the town her and her family lived in. And after she won her case, they had to move, and then she fucking died in a car accident not that long after. Cheryl, in a way, contained all the tenets of a true victim. Not only was she assaulted by strangers, which tends to get more sympathy than acquaintance rape, she was also white, a mom, and was married. She was what our society sees as a respectable woman, and she was victimized by multiple strange men, won her case, and still dealt with victim blaming and harassment. People still believe she wanted it, even though it was proven in a court of law that she didn't. They were proven guilty. That's what anti-victimists do. They reach for things until there's nothing to reach for. And once they run out of things to reach for, they invent shit to reach for. First, it's innocent until proven guilty. Then when proven guilty, it's I still believe that you're lying. So they love to say, wait for the evidence. You guys are publicly shaming a man without any evidence. And then when there is evidence and witnesses even, it's, well, those witnesses are lying and that evidence is fabricated. Whereas the evidence the perpetrator has provided is definitely not fabricated and more trustworthy for some reason.
Because not only has the victim already had to suffer the original abuse, the public is not now only going to become accessories after the fact to the crime, because they are going to help the abuser gaslight, disparage, and verbally beat their victim into silence. But because this is happening in the public sphere, the intended victim is not the only one made to experience the trauma of this second act. This public lashing is felt by all victims. And it's society's constant infliction of this second act on victims who not only had to experience their own first and second acts, but who know that they're going to have to experience that second act each and every time a woman's abuse is made public. It's that bursts carceral feminism and the knee-jerk reaction to convict and condemn alleged abusers in the court of public opinion without a trial. Because they know, because we know, it's what will absolutely be done to any and every potential victim. That's where the primal urge to lean into punitive measures for men who put us all through this second act comes from. Carceral feminism is born out of the truth that there is literally no path a woman can take, especially Black women, but it's true of all women. There is no path a woman can take that society will not oppose, discredit, and vilify her for.
In fact, the lack of evidence that the perpetrator typically has is enough for anti-victimists. As long as they don't have to believe someone, particularly a woman or a person of color, is a victim, that's all that counts. But because we are fixated on being good people, because good things happen to good people, we have to morally justify our disbelief of victims. It can't just be that I think she's lying, it's also that she's a terrible person for lying, and well, I've actually been a victim of blank, and my victimization is more victim-y than theirs, and I know what real blank looks like. Anti-victimists love to blame everyone else for these issues. They blame people like me for blindly believing victims. They blame cancel culture and outrage culture on why their faves have been revealed to be problematic. They blame who they think are false rape accusers on why it's hard for the real ones to come out. But they never take responsibility for their role in fostering an environment where fewer and fewer people feel comfortable coming forward because of how anti-victimists treat victims online and in public. Protesting against R. Kelly or Louis C.K. for performing at some club or concert is never going to be as destructive as the attacks victims have to endure when they bravely decide to tell people about what they've been through. Anti-victimists are not only hypocritical, but they're also delusional. They continuously imply that it's de rigueur to believe victims immediately. And so they feel their decision to side with the accused is like rebelling against the system, fighting against the man. Because of the sensationalism of Me Too, people have created their own revisionist history of what exactly occurred during that time. Yes, Me Too was a huge and important cultural moment. It became one of the biggest internet hashtags of all time, and it put away one of the most famous movie producers in Hollywood. It exposed many others and brought about a conversation around consent. And it also encouraged a lot of victims to understand and unpack their own experiences with SA. What people forget, though, is that the minute Me Too started, a backlash was already slowly forming. Because that is literally what happens any and every time a progressive movement tries to get legs. You had men centering their own fears of being outed, or men like Henry Cavill saying that men will be too afraid to go out with women out of their fear of being Me Too'd. And then there was the Aziz Ansari situation. A story that was complicated enough for people to use as an example of how Me Too had gone too far. And if you've seen my Amy Schumer video, a lot of women of color's Me Too stories were completely suppressed and ignored. Aside from R. Kelly's victims, which had previously been ignored widely, Susie Hardy and her story has never gotten any mainstream attention, and Ryan Seacrest's career and reputation has remained untainted. Bill Cosby was exonerated 3 years after he was convicted, and while he is still in prison, Harvey Weinstein's conviction was overturned and is apparently set for a retrial this year. I won't be surprised if he is released. As with any radical progressive movement, people overestimate the impact of them, profess that they've gone too far, and then swing the pendulum in the opposite direction. Now instead of believe women, it's go back to being suspicious of women always. It's maybe she was the abuser. It's believe men, believe predators, believe abusers, believe and take the sides of those in power. Now it's women can lie too, as if that's some earth-shattering revelation that no one's ever had the balls to say. As if because of Me Too, we stop thinking that women are liars. The idea that the dominant culture has moved forward enough for the systemic distrust of women to be anything other than a default setting is somewhere between bizarre fantasy and bold-faced manipulation. In reality, everyone still thinks women are lying all the time, and they never stop for a second. Similarly, the mainstream Me Too movement offered temporary catharsis in place of systemic change. Hollywood play-acted a revolution so that its men could keep up their abuse unscathed. There is something phenomenally painful in watching a material backlash erupt in response to a movement that was never allowed to be anything more than aesthetic. Something that has always struck a chord with me when it comes to Humans is the way they center themselves when other people are talking about their own experiences. If someone is telling a story of being assaulted, either people will proclaim that they would have done something different to avoid being assaulted, or they will mention how they went through the same thing and either did something different or didn't see what happened to them as a big deal because they've been through something worse. How would you be offended by that? I wouldn't be offended by that. I think you're just being sensitive. As Allison M. Cole laid out for us, anti-victimists want to knock self-proclaimed victims off of their mantle. They want to remove any virtue and they want to find any kind of fault in your character or in your past in order to avoid seeing you as a human being. But why is that? Why is it easier to dismiss someone's humanity if they've done something mildly wrong, or if they're not a perfectly nice and kind person, or if they came off as mean to us in an interview?
One thing that I think about, which I think is super relevant because it gets brought up all the time, like the internet loves how Robert Pattinson in particular does interviews for press for movies. The internet loves this idea that Robert Pattinson would bash Twilight and that he would make fun of Twilight. And the internet loves that he would like tell these like tall tales to reporters. And then later he came out and said that he made it all up because he felt that the interview questions were so vacuous and he was like disassociating. Things that like, quite frankly, are rude, but funny. And when a man like Robert Pattinson conducts himself like this in interviews, people love it. They respond so positively to it. But if a woman were to do the same thing, then she's called a mean girl. And that, to me, gets at the heart of this issue, which is that it is a gender double standard that disproportionately penalizes women for behavior that is rewarded in men.
People do wrong things all the time. People can be mean. People can be rude. Sometimes people are worse than others, and some definitely more deserving of shame than others. But people are still people. After all, if I haven't said it enough, we're more forgiving of shitty men who haven't changed than we are of marginalized people who have committed way less severe acts of harm. These questions are what came to mind during the It Ends With Us drama that took over the internet during the summer of 2024.
Are you going to sue Blake Lively too?
Into oblivion, Megan. Wait till you see this lawsuit.
Oh boy. Well, for what?
It Ends With Us is in theaters now, so grab your friends, wear your florals, and head out to see it.
Grab your striped pajamas, because you're not going to want to miss this.
This movie, I think that like when you see it, it feels like a big, beautiful summer movie, but like it didn't have any budget.
It Ends With Us is certainly not a big, beautiful summer movie. I mean,
especially after people caught wind of this next interview that had my jaw on the floor.
So if someone understands the themes of this movie, comes across you in public, and they want to really talk to you, what's the best way for them to be able to talk to you about this? How would you recommend they go about it?
I guess people felt that it was a bit pretentious, a bit weird, a bit snooty, a deliberate non-answer.
Asking for like my address or my phone number or like my location share.
It's not really that difficult of a question. He wasn't asking you logistically. I think you knew what he was asking, and even if he asked it in a weird way.
Job, but I think that was a weird question. Though,
if we're lucky enough to run into a celebrity in public, we only have a few moments on a deeply personal level. They're really going to want to talk. Understands the themes of this movie, comes across you in public. What's the best way for them to be able to talk to you about?
Everybody's mad at Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Malaki?
Everybody's mad at Blake. I get it. I don't get what her response was, but what was that question?
Because just because somebody's not giving you a customer service smile doesn't mean they're being mean. Different people have different social cues, etc. But I feel pretty confident in saying Blake Lively is just being really mean to this interviewer for no reason.
Bring your oxygen tanks because this movie is going to take your breath away.
I think there are better people for that one.
Justin.
I think Blake Lively's ready to direct. That's what I think.
Rumors started swirling that there was tension between Justin and Blake over creative differences. And then when they started doing the press tour, people quickly realized that Justin was doing the interviews separate from the rest of the cast, and that the majority of the cast unfollowed him on Instagram.
According to the filings and some of the screenshots from messages between Baldoni and or like his team amongst each other, the catalyst for him hiring outside PR firms to assist was that he noticed that, Ryan Reynolds had blocked him on Instagram.
There are now 3 legal filings in this drama, so let's break it all down. December 23rd, Blake filed a complaint against Justin with the California Civil Rights Department, accusing her director and co-star of sexual harassment and waging a smear campaign.
She spent the last 4 months curating a lawsuit against Justin Baldoni to take him down. And
because you guys orchestrated having a bunch of people unfollow him in the style of your best friend Taylor Swift, and the public noticed and began asking questions, going, what's going on? We're noticing that Blake is not appearing alongside the lead character, Justin Baldoni, and also all these people have unfollowed him.
For instance, Blake's complaint claims Justin entered her trailer uninvited, including while she was breastfeeding. Justin refutes that in his filing, showing Blake sent him this alleged text, quote, "I'm just pumping in my trailer if you want to work out our lines."
Remember this dude? He posted this statement on his Instagram, and disheartening to see the amount of negativity being projected online. I find the use of the word projected very interesting. If anything, I would use the word reflected, because a lot of this was based off of Blake's intensely negative energy.
Sources, Justin had to lift Blake in a scene, and he had really bad back problems, so he asked how much she weighed. This then led her to feel fat shamed. So the allegation was that he fat shamed her. Blake probably really truly did feel that way and truly did feel really uncomfortable. But given that the allegations are so vague and quite interestingly timed, the intention does seem a little bit suspicious. I think Blake and her PR team were probably a little bit naive to how media literate audiences have gotten and how they kind of start to understand PR strategies.
This does feel like a very kind of Johnny Depp move. And the whole thing of like, according to our sources, Justin has a history of back problems, and before lifting Blake, he went to his on-set trainer and asked how much she weighed and how he could train to protect his back from injury.
More inquiries by Mr. Baldoni to BL's trainer without her knowledge or consent to disclose her weight. No more mention by Mr. Baldoni of him, quote, speaking to, end quote, BL's dead father.
Just because someone says something you don't like doesn't mean you can have a cause of action to sue them.
It was really important that he know how much Blake Lively weighed, because he's like the victim in this situation where a woman possesses gravity.
I was like, okay, definitely Justin's team is talking to TMZ directly. There's no way this isn't coming from them specifically, which is weird. And then, like, the explanation here about, like, he has a history of back problems, and before lifting Blake, it's like, what a specific defense that he has for this. It's like he was waiting for it.
And I can tell you right now that it is exhausting trying to be man enough for everyone all the time. I would pretend to, like, change my voice, and like my voice would squeak when I would talk a little bit like that, and I just wanted the other kids to see me like them. At one point, all the kids were getting zits early on, and then they were making fun of me for not having zits.
Like I felt like an outsider. Like I would walk into a party, and I would want to fit in. I wouldn't want to stand out. I would want to like wear whatever cool people were wearing, or dress however.
Then why did you wear your pajama tops to this interview?
You mentioned earlier that you just wanted to be accepted. You weren't always really liked. You wanted to fit in, right?
The resentment I had for my dad, I now realize had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with me. And my longing to be accepted and to play a role that was never meant for me. The analogy of the womb world. But if you think about it, he says the womb world. Why would he choose that word? I mean, when I get direct messages on Instagram from women that tell me I'm perfect and they look the way they do, I just try to delete. Because it's conscious, because I know where that goes, and I know that I'm also weak. I'm not.
We as men are just comfortable with stuff. Like we see behavior, the fact that it doesn't jar us and make us go, whoa, and the fact that you say just 3 years ago.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem we gotta like investigate, right?
CF, when you spend, a third or fourth of your life in the hospital, you grow up around doctors, you grow up around adults, and you have to grow up a lot faster than normal. And an interesting parallel is Cole grew up on television and grew up with, producers and directors and adults in his life. And because
says patience. He was accused of ripping off a similar script called 3 Feet Apart, written by a man with CF who appeared in Justin's docuseries, My Last Days.
We at Wayfair Studios were planning to make this movie was for this reason, because to create a cultural moment that could potentially save and impact millions of lives.
But Blake Lively plays the main character, Lily Blossom Bloom, who runs a flower shop. Yes, really, that's her name.
And the only way to do that is to make Ryle a human and to protect Lily in that way, because I didn't want anybody. Look, we have enough people in the world judging women for staying in these relationships. We have enough of that. We have enough man-hating movies that exist in the world, but this is a movie about trauma and ending generational cycles.
Because instead we need to be asking ourselves, well, why do men harm? Did she stay? And that's the wrong question. What we need to be asking ourselves is, why do men harm? The real question is, why do we keep allowing men to harm? Why do we keep, why have we created a system where men, can make it unsafe for 1 in 3 women globally? And I think we men have to step up and figure out how we can be better allies and do the work internally, become safe spaces for ourselves, so this world can finally be a safe space for everybody that we love.
Thank you, by the way, for all of that. Yes. I mean, really, and the fact that it's coming from a man and the director doing is wonderful.
But it wasn't just the women that I was thinking about.
Yep.
I was thinking about the men too, because I still believe in my heart that men are inherently, intrinsically good, as I write in Man. And I do not believe that most men want to be abusers.
The summer of 2024 was very chaotic for a multitude of reasons. We were experiencing a very contentious election. I was experiencing a really bad depression while also managing to turn out more videos than I had previously. I had to dump a shitty therapist and I was on the brink of a friendship breakup, so needless to say, I was not invested in the It Ends With Us drama. I kept hearing about it, I kept seeing videos on my timeline talking about the upcoming movie, the book, the author, but none of this piqued my interest. But said ex-friend was interested, and she dragged me to the theater to see it not that long after it premiered in August. I'm not exactly mad that I saw it, I was madder at how long the runtime was, because I'm tired of white men making 3-hour movies for no reason. But I had a fine viewing experience, I guess. The movie wasn't that moving or groundbreaking to me. The domestic violence message was something that I had already seen a million times before and came to the same conclusions, but aside from that, it was an interesting watch, I suppose. The buzz surrounding the film was an even more interesting watch, and whether you wanted to know or not, this buzz was inescapable. I've seen Gossip Girl. I had heard of Justin Baldoni, but completely forgot its existence until this movie came out. And I was never a fan of Blake Lively's work, and now I was hearing about her nonstop. It started with the infamous Kirsty Flaw interview, the Blake Lively interview that made me want to quit my job. See, the title primes you for how you should feel once observing the video. And I'll admit, she had me. It did feel rude and awkward, and it did look like they'd hurt the poor interviewer's feelings. The comments were filled with people outraged at how much of a mean girl Blake Lively was being in this interview, at least to them. The comments at the time didn't alarm me too much, because it did rub me the wrong way, but then shit started getting weird. Now I was hearing people mocking the outfits she wore in the movie, and rumors circulating that there was beef between her and Justin Baldoni, the director and producer of the movie. Another thing that set off alarm bells was when I realized, and shout out to Blake Lively for looking mostly the same, because I didn't realize that it was an old interview. I was so focused on what she and Parker Posey were doing that I didn't even register that this was an old interview. So I decided to just observe this fiasco from the sidelines.
Something's not right. Really wrong.
I was hearing conflicting views from my friends and people who I followed online, and I kept seeing comments from people comparing this to the Don't Worry Darling press tour from a couple of years ago. It wasn't until the YouTuber Zayd brought up at the time how Justin Baldoni had hired the same crisis PR team that helped smear Amber Heard, and offered context on what was happening during the 2014 interview that I realized we were possibly experiencing deja vu.
Obviously, there are some weird things around promoting your hair brand with a movie about domestic violence. Obviously, the book itself is very controversial. Colleen Hoover, by the way, marketed this book very similarly. And the number one, that interview is from 2014, and I particularly singled out that clip with Lively saying, "Oh, I like your bump too," because that's getting the biggest backlash. So do you know what was happening during 2014? I dug a little bit, and there was an enormous movement during 2014 within society about the way women are approached and questioned during press tours. Female astronauts were also asked sexist questions. Here is an Anthony Lane profile about Scarlett Johansson published at the time in The New Yorker. Would it be construed as a trespass, therefore, to state that Johansson looks tellingly radiant in the flesh? Mind you, she rarely looks so unradiant, it's hard to say whether her condition, pregnancy, has made a difference. Multiple actresses were really upset with this line of fucking questioning where people just ask about like, oh, how are your kids? How are you pregnant? What are you wearing? So when I see this interview posted after a guy hired a fucking crisis PR firm, I'm a little suspicious.
The concept of listening to your gut can be problematic for its own reasons, but I do think having a deep understanding around specific topics can give you the ability to be intuitive when something like this is happening. We can recognize certain bigotries in the abstract, but when it's actually playing out in front of us, we get amnesia all of a sudden. BL haters have formulated their own defense strategy against anyone who will accuse them of being sexist. They found a convenient way to justify their hatred by laser focusing on the way Blake promoted the film and her past indiscretions. During the press tour, Blake was talking about the film in interviews as though the film was a rom-com and not a film about DV. They were mad that she was promoting her alcohol brand Petty Booze due to how alcohol plays into DV situations. If these harassment allegations hadn't come out, I could maybe somewhat defend these criticisms, but as the internet is wont to do when it comes to a woman, everything is taken way too far. Maybe it is bad to do what she did, but also, and I hate to reiterate one of my least favorite thought-terminating cliches, but was it really that deep?
Supposed to do it in a way that made it so easy to fall in love on screen.
I couldn't tell you. I mean, we didn't really talk about it.
You could tell her.
I mean, I could tell you it's...
You could say like really nice things.
I'm just a really good actor, you know?
But as usual, Blake pushed him into speaking about it like she was fishing for compliments. It's not surprising that they sometimes get uncomfortable when she's talking in interviews.
No, you'd be surprised how much hasn't happened. You know, at the end of the first season, I was like, okay, well, what happens now? But we have a few more characters already in the beginning of the first season that come in and mess up our lives even more. We start in the Hamptons, which is a staple of New York socialites that you haven't yet seen. And, you know, we all kind of dated each other, so we have to date more people.
It's funny how America Ferrera kept rolling her eyes at Blake and ended up laughing out loud in the end, and it goes to show that a lot of drama does happen behind the scenes.
Things you guys get mad at female celebrities for versus male celebrities is literally night and day. I can understand bitching about it in a group chat or with friends over brunch, but to spend actual hours of your day making videos complaining about her promoting her alcohol brand is just a little bit much. A man can be a serial cheater, a misogynist, a known predator, a rude asshole, and people will defend it in any way they can. But if a woman comes off as rude or commits some moralistic crime that we've decided is a crime that day, she will be treated as though she did commit an act of sexual violence. You can accuse a man of being a sex pest or a rapist, and people will say you're trying to cancel them as they are canceling a woman for promoting a movie wrong.
We're gonna yank him, tear him, and rip him. We're gonna take him and roll him around and rip him up to pieces. And then we're gonna slaughter him. And after the slaughter is over, we're gonna come back here and ring that victory bell. Like we always wanted.
And it's kind of ridiculous because the movie is not that impressive. Had all this shit not occurred, people would have forgotten about this movie in about a year. There would have been a shit ton of video essays about it, and then the world would have moved on and never looked back. As Ofidoki pointed out in one of her videos, it feels like it came out in 2012. And as Zayd pointed out, Colleen Hoover didn't exactly promote her book any better than Blake promoted the adaptation. Nevertheless, this entire ordeal has provided us with clear villains and clear heroes. Justin has promoted the movie the right way. He talked about DV, he talked about the DV organization No More, made brown-noser comments about Blake Lively.
And as I would try something in a scene, I would watch as Ryle, Blake playing Lily, react in a way that I didn't see before. And then I was able to go, oh, I went too far. And then I could pull it back because she's such a wonderful listener. I don't know if you know how smart and creative she really is. I think she's best known as an actress, and of course she's, a fashion, icon, but everything she touched, she made better. She's just a walking, creative. To act and play Ryle while she's playing Lily and seeing, oh, if I go too far in this direction, her performance changes in real time because she's so responsive and she's so reactive. It actually really helped me in the directing process, directing myself, because I had somebody who was just, it's like the difference between driving, maybe like a Toyota Camry, no offense to Toyota Camrys, or like a Ferrari. She is a dynamic creative. She had her hands in every part of this production, and everything she touched, she made better. She's like a creative force, and also so funny and charming and disarming when you meet her. I just knew right away that she was Lily, and I'm just so grateful that she agreed to do this.
He talked about the female gaze and says he wanted this movie to reach men especially. Men who maybe have been abusive can watch this and realize they need to change. In order for women to get out of these situations,
also says that the only way for a man generally to stop abusing or to stop hurting a woman is for that woman to leave. And then in the next relationship, he can break the cycle. So what's it like to lose everything?
Yeah, that's not true. The person may try to leave, or they do leave, and their abuser retaliates because abusers are possessive. If their object has gotten away from them, most of them are not just going to be like, oh, I guess she's done with me now. But no one is talking about that because no one actually cares about DV, nor do they even understand DV. In my recent video about Ricky Lake, I talked about concern trolling and how people will use real world issues as a cover to justify their bigotry or their hatred of something or someone. It's easy to weaponize the discussion around DV against Blake Lively because she isn't talking about it. And that alone feels like enough for us to dogpile on her. And in turn, we don't question or side-eye anything Justin is saying because we've decided he's a nice guy who cares about women, and Blake Lively is a mean girl who doesn't. Justin being a nice guy is also enough for people to catch on, understandably, to the fact that most of the cast of the film did not want to be on the red carpet with Justin Baldoni, and many of them were not following him on social media, but came to the baffling conclusion that it must be because they're trying to push Justin out of his own movie. Instead of correctly suspecting that usually when the employees are not fucking with the boss, it's usually because the boss sucks. It's why are they being so mean to poor Justin? Why are they leaving him out of his own movie? Once rumors swirled that Blake and her husband Ryan Reynolds had stolen his movie, this only further pushed Justin into true victimhood camp. And Justin loves being in that camp. Before It Ends With Us dawned upon us, Justin Baldoni was mostly famous for playing Raphael in the CW show Jane the Virgin with Gina Rodriguez. It is this portrayal in this show that apparently led viewers to believe that Justin Baldoni was not white. It's the Ariana Grande effect. Let's just make it clear right here and now. Justin Baldoni is white. He is a white man. You know how I know? Because he said it himself.
There isn't a rule book. I'm going to say it. There is no rule book for white, straight, cisgendered men. Of all the things that we can and can't say, there isn't. How do we learn about it? By being open to discourse, by being willing to have uncomfortable conversations.
Correct.
And by saying the wrong thing and being open to feedback.
In Man Enough, Baldoni does write about being cast as characters who were not white like him. He writes, "My agent and manager then flat out asked me if I was willing to trim and pluck my eyebrows because it would help me get these kinds of parts. What exactly were these kinds of parts? I couldn't articulate it then, but I am able to now. These were parts that were set up to be played by traditionally white guys. The irony? I am white."
In the same way Tracy Flick or Hillary Clinton or Blake Lively being a woman is not irrelevant when it comes to certain discussions around them, Justin being a conventionally attractive cis straight white man is incredibly relevant here. Yes, men can get away with being charming or funny or likable even if they are not conventionally attractive like with Louis C.K. But checking off almost every box on the conventional hotness checkboard means you don't need any kind of charm to make up for anything. You can just be hot and have a soothing and soft voice. You can be a wife guy, a girl dad, a feminist dad. And people will naturally let their guard down and accept the things they say at face value.
Because of the Me Too movement, I started thinking about my own silence and complicity. I remember being 17 years old and having a guy that was a really popular guy. He was a football player. And I was out with him and he was drinking. And he was dating a girlfriend of mine because I was friends with all the girls. And he cheated on her in front of me. And I remember being so conflicted of who my loyalty was to in that moment. Was it to him? The popular dude on the football team? The hunter, the guy that could probably kick my ass? Or was it to his girlfriend, who's also my friend? And I remember I didn't say anything to her.
Many of you have probably seen his famous TED Talk from 2018, where he talked about how exhausting it is trying to be quote-unquote man enough. He's tired of performing and explains how we're taught that boys are strong and girls are weak. And as a man, he's here to say, this is wrong. This is toxic, and it has to end.
Well, I came here today to say, as a man, that this is wrong, this is toxic, and it has to end.
Oh, Lordy. As will become a pattern, he reassures the men in the audience that he isn't saying that there is anything inherently wrong with them, and that this doesn't mean that they have to stop being men. Justin tells us that he blamed his dad for making him soft. And he details the way generations of men in his family were unable to ask for help and kept their pain hidden. This is where Justin says that he was taught that being a man means to sacrifice, to not express to others when you are hurting, how men's deep fear of admitting that they're struggling is how so many men just suffer in silence. All of these things are pretty much true, but Justin is good at that. He's good at saying the things we want to hear, things he knows more people today would agree with than 20 or 30 years ago. But his solutions to these problems and the way he approaches these topics is concerning in a way that you could easily miss if you are just absorbing this passively or uncritically. Justin shares a story about a time where he really wanted to talk to his male friends about something that was bothering him. So he orchestrated a whole guy's trip in order to do so. Once he opened up, he recalls, he realized he wasn't alone because they all opened up too. And then the pain was gone.
And as soon as I found the strength and the courage to share my shame, it was gone.
Okay, yeah, no. Well, we'll get back to that later. Put a pin in that. Being vulnerable and authentic is what pushed Justin to try and amass an online following, and felt the need to build a system of accountability, whatever that means. Towards the end of the speech, he shares some saccharine story about this homophobic commenter insulting a photo he posted of him and his wife.
To be seen, to be heard, and all he needed was another man holding him accountable and creating a safe space for him to feel, and the transformation was instant.
Understanding the way cis straight men think, he did an experiment where he tried to appeal to men by posting about his workouts, meal plans, and other manly stuff. This helped him gain more male followers, but this disappointed him because he realized when he talked about his wife or his daughter, he only got attention from women. 14 minutes in, he admits that he was unconsciously treating the women in his life poorly. For example, his wife disclosed that he had a habit of cutting her off when she spoke, and he asked himself, can I be man enough to just shut up and listen?
Yeah, it was unconscious. So here I am doing my part, trying to be a feminist, amplifying the voices of women around the world, and yet at home, I am using my louder voice to silence the woman I love the most. So I had to ask myself a tough question. Am I man enough to just shut the hell up and listen?
Justin ends the speech telling men that they are not just part of the problem, they are the problem, and that it's time for men to see past their privilege because words are not enough. Justin shares a Baha'i quote that reads, "The world of humanity is possessed of two wings, the male and the female. So long as these two wings are not equivalent in strength, the bird will not fly." Then begs women to forgive them. Justin says men are fuck-ups. They're gonna offend you and they're gonna say the wrong thing, but you must be patient. Put a pin in that too. Consuming copious amounts of Justin Baldoni content, you begin to pick up on a few things, like his fixation on forgiveness. You'll often hear him say, "I'm not perfect."
This year, and for the last 40 years, and show my son that I am imperfect, and improve on the relationship that I had with my dad.
This is not a place where I, need to look great, because as we know, I'm far from perfect. So just like this is, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to mess up. Perfection is unattainable. But I think also what we can admit is that most men, all of us, have not been perfect and have messed up past and have made big mistakes. And guess what? You just heard my wife say that I'm also far from perfect. Because at the end of the day, we can't expect people to be perfect.
And I know that I'm also weak. I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect.
Yeah.
I adore my wife.
Far. Super far from
so
perfect.
far.
Can't even see the other side.
We've all said this at some point, right? But doesn't it seem like the main people who say this the most are people who use said statement as a way to ward off any detractors and gain sympathy? Nobody's perfect. We all know that because Hannah Montana sang a song about it in 2007. No one should ever expect anyone to be perfect because perfection is fake. There's no such thing. Nothing can ever be perfect, and people definitely can never be perfect. Have you read a history book? Trust me, human beings will never be perfect. Men, like most people, are going to mess up. And maybe we could have more grace for them, but are y'all giving that kind of grace to women? Women are not allowed to mess up, and so I struggle to not roll my eyes when men are telling me that we need to just be more patient with them and more forgiving when they are not patient with us. Because now that we have a better understanding of men's issues and generally people agree that men are conditioned to be toxic, we're now telling women that they must baby men and cuddle them because, well, they don't know any better. These men are not adults, they're babies, and they're gonna mess up and you must give them a chance. The thing about Justin Baldoni and his best friend / co-host Jamie Heath is that they are enablers. If you watch their podcast man enough, you'll most likely be bored out of your mind. But if you manage to get through a few episodes, you will notice that it is simply a vanity project for both Jamie and Justin. To an exhausting degree, they consistently remind the listener that they've made mistakes, and their wives stuck by them no matter what. They're not perfect, and they want to take accountability. They regularly platform their wives and give them a space to talk about motherhood, something Justin's wife Emily is very passionate about. Both Jamie and Justin are always super vague about what mistakes they made or what harm they've inflicted, and they always feel inclined to hammer into our heads that the men they're speaking to are not the worst of the worst, not the irredeemable ones.
Let's talk about the pendulum, like the entire scale of abuse, right? I'm not talking about the 1% that need to be locked up immediately.
Right.
Okay. Because there is no hope for them. They are, they would be comparable to a dog that's been abused, and every time the dog goes out, he bites somebody or bites a child. You have to put the dog down.
Unsurprisingly, they whine about terms they don't understand, like toxic masculinity, because they don't want to bash men.
And it's one of the reasons why on our podcast, you've never heard us say the words toxic masculinity. We are not attacking men.
No.
And they will confidently declare at least 10 times an episode that most men are not bad. Justin even says men are inherently and intrinsically good in one episode, which is wild because no one is intrinsically good. Liz Plank, their smarter feminist co-host, is always talking about her love of men. The podcast is about toxic masculinity, even if that is a misandrist term, apparently. And I don't think it's bad for men to have a space where they can talk specifically about their issues. But it's the way they patronize men and reinforce benevolent sexist ideals and a lack of understanding around the topics they claim to care about that I feel is more harmful than alcohol and hairline. Exhibit A. Emily Baldoni's fixation on motherhood. Emily is one of those mom idealizing feminists that I kind of complained about in my mom video. She is almost never talking about women who aren't mothers. Her advocacy for moms to be in community with each other actually sounds fine, but then she gets emotional when talking about the lack of exaltation for mothers.
They're making the world run, yet they're never getting accolades. They're not getting awards. Nobody cares. They're not getting paid. Right?
I blame frickin' society for this because mothers in general are forgotten. They are not seen. They are not celebrated. I get emotional just talking about it. Oh, it infuriates me. Mothers need to be lifted up, supported, celebrated because they are raising the next generation. There is no bigger achievement than birthing human life. And it is 100% in the hands of the feminine.
Here's why this is a problem. It propagates this myth of mothers being inherently good because they give birth.
You fucking create life. We make life.
I agree with her that moms are not supported in this country, but so much of her complaints are more about the lack of glorification and support from their partners. The support from their partners thing I get, but moms don't need support solely because they give birth. They need support because being a parent in this country is really stressful and expensive. They need support because pregnancy and labor can pose serious health risks for people with uteruses. The goal shouldn't be, let's glorify mothers instead. When Justin pats himself and Wayfarer on the back for wanting to make an effort to hire moms, Emily tells Justin that it would be a gift to them if they hired more mothers because of their patience and grace.
I mean, you would be so lucky to have mothers on your team.
Yep.
Let's look at what you learn as a mother. Infinite patience, compassion, the ability to just like show up no matter how tired you are.
Something I didn't mention in his TED Talk is this seemingly innocuous comment about how they're only here because of you. You as in women. He's complimenting women for their ability to have children. Exhibit B. Emily's toxic relationship advice. Justin constantly thanks his wife for not giving up on him, telling her that she could have left so many times, but didn't.
I just want to say, God, first of all, thank you. If you could have given up on me a lot of times. I've made a lot of mistakes. And your grace and your compassion and your love and your belief that I can be better, even when I fuck up, is why we're even here.
In a particularly alarming moment during one episode on mothers, Emily tells women to thank their husbands when they do their jobs as fathers.
I want you to continue to grow as a father and a man, but that thank you is important to fuel that growth, to fuel the healing that we all need so much. And if we want to create any kind of unity at some point in the future, we need to remember to see the humanity in each other.
Seeing the humanity in each other is key, she says. And she feels that if she could understand her husband's trauma and his pain, then maybe she wouldn't be so angry all the time.
And as a mother, I have to understand how Justin was wired, how he was brought up, masculinity, what that has done in his life, and how that is informing the way that he fathers our children. If I can understand his trauma, if I can understand his wounds and his wiring and his blueprint, then I don't have to be so goddamn angry all the time. I see his humanity.
This is fucked up for many reasons. What Emily is saying here is that it's imperative to get to the bottom of your husband's behavior in order for you to relax and proceed with more care and empathy. Understanding someone's behavior is a core part of empathy, but having trauma or mental health struggles is not a justifiable excuse for bad behavior, and you do not have to be more forgiving just because you learn that your partner has experienced trauma. It's the same thing with parents. Many parents were abused by their partners, but that doesn't make it okay for them to abuse their kids. Saying it's important for women to have grace and to set your valid feelings of hurt and anger to the side if your man has issues is really dangerous rhetoric. And it's not something that ever works for women. If I were to use my mental health struggles and PTSD as an excuse for my behavior, I would get eaten alive. They would do me how Angela Baker did that one girl in Sleepaway Camp 2.
Say no to drugs.
Mental health excuse only works for white male mass shooters and white male family annihilators. Exhibit C, saying the right thing and paying lip service. Emily and Justin make sure to say all the right things in order for these concerning comments to fly under the radar. For example, Emily says women are allowed to be angry, but it's important to not point the finger and give space for growth.
Women have the right to be angry and to be upset. Like we have the right to be, but I also see that we have a responsibility here to also create space for growth.
Saying women have a right to be angry and then saying you have a responsibility to not express that anger too intensely feels like you're just paying some lip service while playing into benevolent sexism. Because that's what this is. Emily is telling women to be like Elena Gilbert from TBD. Elena Gilbert's goodness and virtue is what gives her this unflinching ability to forgive and to not give up on her loved ones. Aben repeatedly proves himself to be an awful person who does nothing but disappoint her. But she sees the good in him, and this gives him an endless amount of chances. Elena being the first person he's ever been serious with besides Catherine is meant to set Elena apart from other women. Other women would have given up, but not her, because she's a real woman, a good woman. A good woman is a woman who stands by her man no matter what. A good woman is a ride or die. A good woman is one who is patient and graceful, who understands that people are a work in progress. There's a comment I found under a different video they did on Tough Love where they said, I am 47 years old, and this is the first time in my entire life that I've seen men cut it straight to each other and share vulnerabilities. They share where they have blind spots and need to grow, and how their wives are their support systems as well, and often the doers of emotional support for the better. If more women had men like this in life, the home, the workplace, society, there would be so much less strife. If women would be this way to their men and not be so toxic, the world would be collectively in a higher state of awareness, and we'd all be better off as a society in interpersonal relationships. I need friends like these too, and I wish the men in my life treated me with kindness and appreciation. Dads, partners, coworkers, etc. That's really sad. Exhibit D, incentives. They feel incentives are good, actually, and you should congratulate people as they progress through their journey to be better husbands.
Here to also create space for growth, and nobody can go from 1 to 10 in a day.
Maybe of step 20, that I need to know that I need to do it because that's my role as a human being, and not because I'm getting an accolade. Because I brought this up the other day. There is a part of many men that feels like we deserve a trophy. In heterosexual marriages, when men and women share those responsibilities, sex increases.
2 or 3.
incentives matter. Sure. God gives us these things. God tells us in all teachings of religions, if people are religious in whatever faith they follow, that when you do this, X happens. That when you pray, when you're kind to people, this happens. Heaven is promised when such and such, right? We are given incentives to be better. So if men are at the bottom, if there are white people that are still got their foot on my neck, and if you need an incentive to take your foot off my neck, then fine. Have a cookie. And when society continues to progress and grows, then fine, we'll take off the cookies.
Sure, you can't expect people to change in the snap of a finger, but solidarity with other people from different communities or supporting the women in your life is not supposed to have conditions. You're supposed to do these things because you believe in your heart that it is the right thing to do. You should not need rewards for doing better than your parents, and you should not expect rewards because that is how we end up with people like Amy Schumer telling LGBTQ people and black people that they are bitches for not being Zionists like her, because she protested for them once. Because what are you gonna do if you don't get a reward? Are you just gonna stop caring and go back to your old ways? Is that the kind of person you wanna be? Someone who needs to be given a treat like a dog in order to be a kind and considerate person? A conversation around the phenomenon of fathers being glorified on social media comes up. Jamie makes a strange point about how men might feel the need to deflect when they're being commemorated by commenters on social media. All three of these men compliment their wives and the hard work of mothers as a way to gain feminist cred. It works because it sounds pro-women when it's really just placing mothers at the top of the woman hierarchy. This conversation could have been more interesting if we stopped and asked, why do we assume someone is a good father based on a video of them doing something nice for their kids in the first place? I watch a lot of TikToks of parents who post videos of their kids doing funny stuff. Saying funny stuff and just being kids. I think kids are hilarious, and these videos always manage to make me laugh. But when I watch them, I don't think, wow, that must be a happy family, because why would I say that? Why would I jump to that conclusion based on a 20-second video? Toxic families can have moments of joy and calm. That doesn't mean you should jump to that conclusion about every family you see on the internet. But it's very odd and strange behavior to praise parents whom you do not know because they are aesthetically healthy, I guess, and they look cute. Exhibit E, benevolent sexism and self-awareness. Jamie makes a bold statement about how women are just better, particularly at communicating, and rightly grants this line of thinking to benevolent sexism.
It's a compliment, but it's one way. But then I just heard you say, express to me all the reasons that support my observation that women do those things.
But yet you're still not allowed to say it.
No, it's not even about saying it. I'm just like, yeah. So I'm just curious about how that looks, because I do think women are better, in my experience, at doing many things like communication. Therefore, I think the world should be run by women and women are better. I just think that. I think that because of what you just said.
Liz says it's because women aren't taught to be, but don't worry. Jamie is sure to clarify that he doesn't mean women are superior to men. No.
Right? So from when you say women are just better, that feels like women are just a superior gender.
Oh, I don't mean that.
Well,
but I hear you.
Okay, but saying women are better is saying they are superior. This is what I mean. Benevolent sexism is tricky. It's like being fetishized. At first it feels kind of nice to be told that you're amazing because you're a woman, or that you're sexy because you're fat or dark-skinned. But then it starts to get creepy and it starts to feel patronizing. Like when people think it's a compliment to perpetuate the myth that black women are naturally strong and will save us all. It's deeply insulting and insidious. Black women are human beings just like you. We're not superwomen. We are also vulnerable and fragile and need support. This notion just pushes the narrative that black women don't need support and it's their job to rescue everyone who isn't even interested in rescuing them. Need look no further than the election. If you're saying in one breath that women are better in general and at communicating, but that you're not necessarily saying that women are superior, you are just pandering. You want to express your benevolent sexism by just expressing benevolent sexism with a dash of self-awareness. Exhibit F, centering men. There's another episode that came out in response to the Cassie Diddy video, and it's very revealing of Jamie especially. As with any of their discussions involving violence against women, the Man Enough podcast is mostly focused on the men. What do we do with the men? And what if men have these feelings of anger? What do they do?
There are times when we feel anger. There are times when I have been in an argument with a partner that I can feel feelings of discomfort and need to take a breath. Accountable. How do I stop that? How do I cite for another man to see and realize and recognize, like, that is so terrible, but how close have I come to that? Not me personally, but whoever that individual is listening. How far away am I from that? What could be the trigger that I ever could become that? And how do we stop ourselves?
Jamie and Justin always tell us that they've been in similar situations, but that things didn't escalate to violence. It is important for them to say that every time. It begins to sound like, I'm not like the other toxic men, I'm slightly less toxic. Jamie tells Liz that he imagined if it was his daughter or his wife, and boldly states that if it was his daughter, he'd have to get physical with him. Liz tells him that that's more about you than about her. Jamie agrees, and Liz mentions how the people who worked around Diddy must have known and didn't hold him accountable. Liz smartly points out how people are unwilling to believe women until they get video proof of it. Later, she posits that the video wouldn't have been broadcasted in the way it was had it been a white woman, and Jamie disagrees, because another thing about Jamie is that he is not in touch with his black roots in any way. He clearly spends way too much time around white people because Liz's takes on racism are almost always better than his, and that's embarrassing for him. Jamie says that men who may have been on the fence won't be able to deny the situation once they watch the video, and admits that he's happy the video went public because he feels that if people see it, they'll be so disgusted that they'll reevaluate how they view women. Towards the end, he strangely says that he thinks Diddy must have been intoxicated. The episode officially comes to a close with Liz saying that there are new programs and hotlines for men who are abusive to call into when they feel they might violently harm their partner. They both agree that it shouldn't have taken this long for something like this to exist, and that, sure, women need help, but what's she gonna do if the man doesn't redeem himself? The entire episode, while Liz did make some good points, is almost all about Jamie. He wants to reassure us that he's never gone that far, but then makes a weird comment about how men sometimes get angry. And he really wants us to know that if this was his daughter, he'd be outraged. They also want to differentiate themselves from people like Diddy, as if you're Diddy or you're fine. 80% of the conversation is just Jamie having a conversation with himself where he asks a million questions, kind of answers them, says a bunch of shit that he knows will sound good, and then allows Liz to speak. There's not much discussion around the psychology of abusers. Jamie and Liz feel the solution to this problem is for men to see videos like this and tell themselves that they don't want to become that man. This isn't the first time this podcast talked about DV, nor is it the first time they've talked about it poorly. Remember that No More organization that Justin kept talking about during the press junket? Well, in December of 2023, they released an episode where Justin, Liz, and Jamie had a discussion about DV with the CEO and co-founder of No More, Pamela Zabala and Jane Randall. The conversation they have is all over the place, at times accurate, at times puzzling, but altogether sorely ill-informed. For the first 15 minutes, an ass-kissing fest takes place. Justin compliments them for their contributions to the script. They compliment him for how well he handled this topic.
Because you have a very specific insight on how things can become more accurate and true and real. And we at Wayfair don't ever want to do harm.
That level of joint work is not common. I don't know if you know that or how much you know that.
Yeah, the Wayfarers who took it up, because it could have gotten really destroyed in somebody else's hands.
This is where Justin tells us that he believes men are inherently and intrinsically good, and that most men are not abusive. For clarity, Justin says there's a scale of abuse. He isn't talking about the 1% that need to be locked up immediately.
Right, there's a scale. I'm talking about the first half.
What does that mean, the first half? Justin asks, how do the men who have trauma prevent themselves from becoming their father? The frustrating aspect of this entire conversation is that they seem to not understand that abusers tend to lie and that they aren't typically that eager to get help, and even when they do, they still lie. But they imply that it's nihilistic to bring that up, and we should just coddle abusers and not make them feel bad, when it's actually an important part of the discussion to explain the actual barriers that prevent people from truly changing. And as I said in the last part, shame is not always a bad thing. A good note, they highlight how perpetrators of DV tend to be charming and will charm the people around their partner, and cite this as part of the reason victims struggle to get out. Around this point, because I guess they felt the conversation wasn't terrible enough, Justin for some reason decides to ask Jamie for his opinion. Always a mistake. Through stumbling and fumbling, Jamie says without plainly saying it, that if something isn't rape, is it really that bad?
How do you distinguish a woman who is in a relationship that is being beat down and a woman who is not? A woman that's being raped, a child that's being pinned to the floor, versus a child that's being looked at and feeling uncomfortable. The reason why I ask, and my heart's racing as I do it, because I don't want to, then a friend of someone that I know right now, of my child's friend, who is understandably raising a loud voice, but who is not experiencing what I would say being abused It's uncomfortable. We need some course correction. It's not okay. You know?
But it's not rape.
It's not rape.
But why does it have to be essay? Is that the only time you guys feel it's important to make men feel bad about their actions? Jamie says he wouldn't want to label someone an abuser if they're not being physically abusive, basically. Then says he doesn't mean to rate something as worse than the other when that is what he's saying. Pam and Jane tell Jamie that just because you don't see it as abuse doesn't mean it isn't. Justin asks about this journey to survivorhood, and Jamie says he didn't talk about what happened to him until he was 35 years old, and credits his faith with making him feel like he was enough. 41 minutes in, and Justin brings up the DV number men can call if they are semi-abusers.
You can call a number if he feels he is becoming an abuser, or if he's losing control, or if he's having anger outbursts, or if, God forbid, he pushes his girlfriend, or worse, he can now call this number and get help because there's a belief that even a man that does that doesn't want to be doing it.
God forbid pushes his girlfriend. Jesus Christ. He tells Jamie that his trauma is probably why he was acting out before. But once he had this realization and started the healing process, his behavior changed just like that.
You have this realization, you start your healing process, and your behavior changes.
Yeah.
Nobody wrote you off because you blew up your life before. Maybe some people did, but you've spent the last 15 years earning that back.
Jamie once again compares this to racism and says not only should we coddle abusers by not making them feel guilty or ashamed, we should also not call racist people racist.
Call somebody racist, they get defensive, and now you can't break anything. But if you say, some of the things you're doing right there have racist tendencies, them terrible.
It's like they might do something terrible versus they're terrible.
Like for instance, with our kids, one of the things I do with my two boys, is when they behave in a way that if they continue that behavior through relationships, that would not be okay. I would never call them an abuser, but honey, you know that behavior, how you're treating the girls at school? This is what leads to this. This is what leads to this.
Okay, but those are children who don't know better. Grown adults do know better. I don't get how them constantly talking about this was not a red flag for people. They are projecting so hard.
Never naming him something. So how do we do that with men also that might feel safe to say, yeah, you know, sometimes I've yelled at my girl too aggressively. I got up on her too close. Never touched her, never did anything, you know, but there was that are safe to say like, yeah, I've done that. I got to work with that. But as soon as we label them abusers, then they're like, no, I'm not that guy. They're never going to even admit to it.
Liz clearly frustrated, says that men need to go to other men. After Liz shares her experience with DV, Justin says this.
I think it's easy to look at someone like Liz Plank and go, well, that would never happen to her.
Sure.
I mean, you are so smart and so strong and so aware and emotionally intelligent that it's like, oh, there's no way. There's no way that. And so if it happened to you, it can happen to anybody.
Yeah.
And I think that like you sharing your story is so important.
Why would I say that? Yeah, the alcohol and hairline isn't looking so bad, is it? An hour in, and Justin shares a story where one of Liz's friends admitted to being mean to his wife and called her because he knew she would be honest with him. Justin praises her for not labeling him an abuser or making him feel guilty.
And kind of being mean to her in some ways. And he called you for support because he knew you would be honest with him.
Yeah.
And you made the choice to not label him an abuser. You didn't make him feel guilty. You didn't make him feel shameful. You saw maybe why he was doing it, and you lifted him up, and you gave him the chance to be better. And
after this, Jamie ignorantly states that he doesn't believe white people are racist, and that we're all swimming in the same waters. Liz then disappoints me because they decide to really delve into this concept that people who abuse don't know what they're doing, and they're not aware of gender dynamics, and if they were aware, this wouldn't happen. Jamie says he would like to have the space to ask the questions, and Justin fears that we're getting to a place where we can't do that anymore. Justin tells Jamie he's proud of him for being brave enough to ask the question. Most of this was just telling women to be more patient, more gentle, and more forgiving, because if we aren't, men will never change. And it'll be our fault, I guess. To some extent, I get what Jamie is saying. We don't always give people the space to make mistakes and ask questions we might think are stupid or offensive. However, Jamie doesn't ask these questions because he actually wants answers. He's asking questions that he's already answered in his head, but he wants to look like he's open-minded. That conversation about benevolent sexism could have been so much more insightful. Instead, benevolent sexism sounded good to him, and he knows it will sound good to someone else, so let's just stay there. Like him asking, but really just stating that there's a hierarchy of harm, and the ones at the top, such as SA or CSA, are the only ones we should validate as traumatizing. It's sad because I don't disbelieve that Jamie did experience CSA. But I find it so incredibly disgusting the way he weaponizes his trauma to diminish someone else's because it wasn't on the same scale. The Man Enough podcast is a place where men can go and not feel attacked for being bad or for having done bad things. But in that podcast, they are being given ways to weaponize this kind of language against the people in their lives. If someone is abusive, having a conversation or seeing a video or watching a mediocre movie about DV is not going to radically change that man's world. Justin saying the pain disappeared once he opened up is so disingenuous. Opening up can be helpful, but it is not the end of working through your pain. Knowing the source of your trauma is also not the end of that work. There's an episode they did with Drake Bell not that long ago where the same themes persisted. Drake pulled a Justin Baldoni and made a few over-the-top complimentary statements about his ex-wife. They all relate to each other for not being perfect, and they all fixate on their trauma to lightly excuse their actions. In one of the worst moments, he tries to place the blame of his child endangerment charge on the child he victimized and knew was underage. Liz is the only one who has any shrivel of integrity and does try to challenge Drake. But even when she does, she acts apologetic about it, like she's hurting him by bringing up something that he pled guilty to. But this is the Man Enough podcast. We're not making men feel bad as a priority. Another huge priority is women being as gracious and forgiving as possible because, well, you know us men. Listen, I am not someone who believes in the concept of forgiveness. Even if someone does offer you a proper apology, you are not obligated to forgive anyone. People act like being forgiving is the most virtuous trait that any human can have, and people who can't forgive are petty grudge holders. To be blunt, fuck forgiveness. You do not have to forgive anyone. You don't have to forgive to be able to move on and heal. That's bullshit. And being forgiven should not be your only motivator to apologize and work on yourself. That's not the purpose of an apology. Women don't have to reserve their anger or irritation when men offend or insult them. If they are offended, then that should motivate you to avoid doing that again in the future. It's okay to be uncomfortable when you're the one who made the situation uncomfortable. Like people with immense privilege put marginalized people in uncomfortable situations by saying something deeply bigoted. But then we are told to not be mean when they make us feel uneasy. Because so much of men's insistence on women being nicer and more forgiving is what leads to feminism becoming watered down and palatable and easy to digest, because now it's not about addressing the actual issues. Because addressing the actual issues is what Justin feels is male bashing. Justin Baldoni and his team, aside from Liz to some degree, have a very binary and rudimentary understanding of patriarchy, feminism, and intimate partner violence. When I recapped his TED Talk, I mentioned how Justin described being embarrassed by having a sensitive, non-traditionally masculine dad, and ends up saying that his dad may not have taught him how to use his hands, but he did teach him how to use his heart. So in 2021, on his podcast, where he brought his father on, it seems like his dad was traditionally masculine, and Justin seems to have the same issues many men have with their dads.
Or ends, and I don't know whose fault it is, or if it needs a fault, but there is something that almost prevents it, like this intimacy, at least between you and me. And I don't know, I can't speak for other men and their fathers or boys and their dads, but there was something that prevented me from being fully open and sharing with you, right? And I have to believe that part of that was because you didn't share with me.
I don't think Justin even gets what encompasses patriarchal masculinity because he feels traditional masculinity means being able to fight and use their hands. Those are traits associated with patriarchal masculinity, but being distant and emotionally absent and having this invisible wall in between the both of you is also patriarchal masculinity. He said his dad taught him that a man must sacrifice for his family and hide his pain. Again, results of patriarchy. Justin is only okay talking about patriarchy in certain contexts. They rarely talk about it when they talk about DV. One of the most wild statements Justin makes is when he describes men who are irredeemable as the 1% of people who needs to be locked up. For one, that alone tells you how much research he's actually done on TV. A quick Google search will tell you that about 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced IPV. Sadly, it isn't a single-digit percentage of people who commit this kind of violence, but that's exactly the problem with that statement. Justin doesn't want to acknowledge the kind of abuse that may not be horrific or bloody or deadly because he doesn't want to be associated with those kinds of men. Neither does Jamie. There's a reason his example of how he's let down the women in his life was something as menial as interrupting your wife when she speaks. Rude, yes, but it's a small admission that makes him look like he's the kind of man who can own up to his mistakes. Now he doesn't have to go into detail about these mistakes he made that his wife had to forgive him for, apparently. Mr. Sensitive appears to be the diametric opposite of the drill sergeant. He is soft-spoken, gentle, and supportive when he isn't being abusive. He loves the language of feelings, openly sharing his insecurities, his fears, and his emotional injuries. He hugs other men. He may speak out about the absurdity of war or the need for men to get in touch with their feminine side. Perhaps he attends a men's group or goes on men's retreats. Often he has participated extensively in therapy or 12-step programs, or reads all the big self-help books so he speaks the language of popular psychology and introspection. His vocabulary is sprinkled with jargon like developing closeness, working out our issues, and facing up to hard things about myself. He presents himself to women as an ally in the struggle against sex role limitations. To some women, he seems like a dream come true. The gentleman style of abuser tends to be highly self-centered and demanding of emotional catering. He may not be the man who has a fit because dinner is late, but rather he erupts because of some way his partner failed to sacrifice her own needs or interests to keep him content.
And even if we're, I mean, I'm sure some people would think this is really cute, but we'll sit on a couch with plenty of space and I'm sitting like I'm comfortable. And then he comes and practically sits on top of me. He's like a big dog that believes he's a lap dog. And I'm like, dude, I need space. You don't have to lean on me. So there's just this overall thing of just
complete unawareness
taking up space.
So here's this woman in her, mid, late 20s, and had never met a guy who was this open and vulnerable, and she had no clue what to do with me. And so I was like suffocating her with my passion and my intensity and my love, and it pushed her away, and then I didn't know what to do.
Justin said he wanted this podcast to be a place where they could have real and honest conversations. He says growing up, he always wanted to be accepted by the other boys, but dealt with relentless bullying. I get the sense that Justin does want to be in community with men, and he thinks that if he isn't babying them constantly, he'll scare them away. It's okay for Justin to be concerned about men, to empathize with them, and want better for them. It's also okay for him to center men's issues to some extent, but he, like a lot of people nowadays, is perpetuating this false idea that men are struggling more than women, and so then states that men are left behind and forgotten. It's true that men are left behind in a lot of ways, but so are women, in fact, even more so. People have concocted this idea that women are so much better off than men now, even though we are literally losing our rights that we've had for over 50 years.
And how the system itself is hurting men. So in many ways, we're forgotten, right? You see these viral videos on the internet and TikTok and these places where you see men talk about how they don't have anyone to talk to. I mean, the data shows that men are having less and less friendships, deep friendships now than they ever have. The suicide rate for men is 4 times higher than it is for women.
Yes, men's suicide rate is higher, but there is a reason for that. And hardly anyone likes to provide context for that statistic that has gone through the internet telephone machine. Men have a higher suicide rate because they tend to use guns. You know those things that the lefties keep trying to tell you are bad, but we won't do anything about? Yeah, those things. Women are twice as likely to attempt suicide. Men are not more mentally ill than women, nor are they lonelier than women. Everyone is lonely. We all lived through the pandemic, not just men. We were all deeply affected by it. Many women I know my age have never been in a serious relationship, and some have expressed being very lonely and depressed. Men's and women's issues are not always the same, but we are all struggling. This is something Justin doesn't understand. Everything with Justin's brand is so manufactured and performative to me. He never really says anything of substance. Clearly has a huge ego and thinks way too highly of himself. In the It Ends With Us interviews, there are so many moments where he alludes to using method acting as some kind of insurance that if anything comes out, he can just say he was just method acting. When Justin continuously compliments Blake's intelligence, he is not doing so sincerely. What he is doing is suggesting that if things did get uncomfortable, she was smart enough to speak up and say something. And he even offers a defense for himself. He says, "I knew I went too far." But he uses the word women and weaponizes the women he worked with to endear himself to us is so over the top that it feels like satire. It feels like an SNL sketch, and yet people were eating this up. How?
I wanted to make sure that those scenes had a female gaze. And in no way was I running them through my male brain. As much as I can try to see the world as a woman, I never will be able to. There were many instances on set where I just let the women figure it out, and I took a step back. I didn't want this to feel like it was in any way like these scenes were shot by a man.
You know, Justin, if you were so obsessed with the female gaze, why didn't you just hire a female director? Why did you have to direct it? Don't hear the Baldoni supporters asking that. Also, acting like him saying, "Why don't we ask, why do men harm?" is some monumental statement is absolutely absurd. Abuse victims have been saying that forever. But what about Blake Lively, you ask? Blake Lively isn't innocent either. In 2012, Blake Lively and her husband Ryan Reynolds got married on a plantation. They apologized, blaming Pinterest, and donated $200,000 to the NAACP. I want you to keep that in mind because I have been dreading this section for that reason alone. Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds don't need to be forgiven for this, and they deserve the shit they got for that. As a black woman, it is an odd look to be on here trying to defend this one, but I'm going to explain to you why it was important to me. First, let's return to Justin for a second. Many of you might not know that Justin was also recently sued by a former black employee who sued for racial discrimination. Reportedly, he was made to feel like a token and was hired under the false pretense that he would have a secure job. A key aspect of that contract was the potential of securing equity in the company. But the employee did not know that Baldoni and Sarowitz were already planning to shift the podcast to a different company. So the contract was nullified and he had no job security either. According to this article, the Blake Lively "it ends with us" drama is what kind of buried this story. Also, since the employee dropped the lawsuit. If you bring this up to the Baldoni supporters, they will deny its authenticity and claim it's fake news. And if you're one of those people, ask yourself why. In 2019, Justin directed the 5 Feet Apart movie starring Haley Lou Richardson and Cole Sprouse about 2 youngsters who have cystic fibrosis. Justin apparently stole the script for 5 Feet Apart from someone who was literally dying from cystic fibrosis, but of course no Baldoni supporters are online crying about that. It's almost as though these Baldoni supporters, acting like they're so incensed over this man's movie being stolen, haven't even bothered to look into his background. If you're such a supporter, you should be looking into him too. You should know about this. For those of you living under a rock, after months of constant scrutiny and ridicule from people online, Blake Lively filed a complaint against Justin Baldoni for sexual harassment in December of 2024 and alleged that he, along with his PR crisis team, helped to create a smear campaign against her online. His team, Melissa Nathan and Jennifer Abel, did what is called astroturfing, which is defined as the deceptive practice of presenting an orchestrated marketing or public relations campaign in the guise of unsolicited comments from members of the public. Blake Lively alleges that this was in retaliation to her calling a meeting early in 2024, setting the conditions that would need to be set if Blake Lively were to return to filming It Ends With Us. She detailed her complaints during a meeting with Mr. Baldoni, Mr. Heath, and other producers in January, according to the legal filing. She claimed Mr. Baldoni had improvised unwanted kissing and discussed his sex life, including encounters in which he said he may not have received consent. Mr. Heath had shown her a video of his wife naked, she said, and he had watched Miss Lively in her trailer when she was topless and having body makeup removed, despite her asking him to look away. She said that both men repeatedly entered her makeup trailer uninvited while she was undressed, including when she was breastfeeding. In agreeing to the terms that Miss Lively sought, Wayfarer acknowledged that although our perspectives differs in many aspects, ensuring a safe environment for all is paramount, according to her legal complaint.
The complaint moves into something we already discussed, how Baldoni moved from the agreed-upon marketing plan into his hard pivot, which made Blake look terrible. I will remind you again, a lot of the shit that she got was for not taking this movie appropriately seriously, but as pointed out in the lawsuit, neither was Justin at first, because that was what they agreed upon. You can feel however you feel about that agreed-upon marketing plan where they were not supposed to bring up domestic violence unless they were asked to, but Blake was just doing the job that she was contractually obligated to do. And seemingly, up until Justin realized he had something to cover himself for, he was also following the marketing plan as written. He too was giving little tours of a pop-up flower shop, dressing in florals, until his pivot.
The BL haters say she didn't provide any proof, but that Justin did. They say they don't expect BL to provide some smoking gun evidence, but are fine believing whatever Justin has provided. First of all, Blake did provide proof. She provided text messages to 2 other identified women who were also experiencing harassment by him, allegedly. Most of the cast sided with her, hardly anyone has come out to defend Justin, and Justin's proof didn't really dispute anything. Just because you clearly didn't read the legal document or believe the text messages that were provided, doesn't mean she didn't provide any proof. For example, people feel that because Justin showed a text message of her inviting him to her trailer means she was lying when she says him and Jamie would repeatedly barge into her trailer while she was breastfeeding. This one really gets to me because it's one of those things where if you think about it for 10 more seconds, you realize this proof doesn't prove anything. I'll put it to you like this. If you text me to come to your house and you invite me in, that does not mean that the next day I can just barge into your house uninvited whenever I want. This is not the Vampire Diaries, you guys.
Been invited in. And I will come back tomorrow night and the following night, and I'll do with your little cheerleader whatever I want to do, because that is what is normal to me.
I think people just find her allegations to be not that bad. Most forms of violence like SA or DV or harassment do not always show up how we imagine. This is why people's brains malfunctioned when the Aziz Ansari story came out. We expect assault allegations to involve brutal and gritty details of someone's clothes being ripped off and the woman fighting for her life as the man overpowers her. If it's not overt enough, we don't know how to sit with that, because then we'd have to unpack some of our own experiences and our own behavior in the bedroom. Blake Lively's claims are very detailed and specific. They don't feel like something someone made up. We've all had jobs and shitty bosses and been in toxic work environments. Yet we still struggle to understand how celebrities can fall victim to the very same shit we do. Their lives may look more glamorous, but power dynamics in Hollywood still exist. Misogyny still exists, and regardless of whether or not Blake had more star power, our power will never overpower misogyny. This is why it warmed my heart when Sarah Michelle Gellar and Charisma Carpenter came out to defend Ray Fisher. They could have easily stayed silent and kept their peace, but they stood up for someone who alleged harm against someone they knew was capable of it. And I will forever admire them for that. Because you know it's bad if SMG is coming out to say something. It sickens me that so many people saw the divide among the It Ends With Us cast and decided it must have been because of something sinister on their behalf and not Justin's.
It's like you see this inclination over and over again to sort of view people who have structural power as victims and to view people who lack forms of structural power as aggressors and as perpetrators, even if logically it doesn't make any sense. And we talked about this at the beginning, but it's like, because Blake Lively is viewed as more famous and wealthier than Justin Baldoni, people imagine her as having all the power in the situation. But when you actually examine the circumstances more closely, it's like, well, Justin Baldoni was the director. He was her boss in this setting. Also, structurally, no matter how wealthy or famous a woman is, she's still a woman.
Did we not just get done celebrating the death of a healthcare CEO? Why are we still siding with people in power? Like, are y'all dumb? The way people have been dick riding for Justin Baldoni and victimizing him is truly dumbfounding. Like, it's a masterclass on how perpetrators try to victimize themselves by overstating harm and cry bullying, like the nice pool thing.
Who are you? Oh, I'm Deadpool. And I guess you're Deadpool too. She just had a baby too, and can't even tell. Plated 50 caliber Desert Eagle pistoleros? Of course. To match my ear huggy. That's okay. I identify as a feminist.
First of all, that's a hilarious dig, and I love that Ryan Reynolds did that. Regardless of whether or not you believe Blake, Ryan has a right to be petty to the man he believes sexually harassed and smeared his wife. Like, get fucked. You would want to do the same thing if you were an actor. Second of all, if we are seriously saying that Ryan Reynolds is not allowed to mock Justin Baldoni in a comedy movie, then I guess SNL should be canceled as well, because that's all they do. I guess any piece of art that satirizes or parodies famous figures should be banned from the public, since that's bullying. And the thing is, sometimes it is. But if Britney Spears tried to sue all the people who constantly mocked her on SNL during the 2000s, you guys would have laughed in her face. Be real. If Justin came out with a skit mocking Blake, you guys would celebrate the shit out of it, even if it sucked, which it most likely would, because Justin is not funny or talented.
And the truth is, all of you that are in this room right now, and you watching on YouTube, or wherever you're watching, you're gonna die too. Thank you. Have a good day, everybody. If you're watching this, I just want you guys all to know that you are going to die. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it.
Even the thing about her being rude and mean in interviews is hilarious, because at best, she just comes off as awkward to people who take everything women and marginalized people do seriously. Like, some of these interviews, she's clearly joking and being sarcastic. But women can't do that, I guess. This shit is so annoying because you guys love how awkward and weird Aubrey Plaza is in interviews. There are so many videos about how awkward and hot she is. But we like Aubrey today. So it's okay for her to be sardonic and weird and awkward. Like,
fuck out my face.
The thing about him fat shaming her really cemented to me how fake people were being during the body positivity era, acting like they actually understood fat phobia and body shaming and why it is deeply inappropriate to ask about someone's weight, especially as a boss. You could easily just Not do the scene if you're concerned that she might be too heavy for you to carry. There's also the fact that he hired like a weight loss coach or something, but didn't disclose to her what his actual job was, which is so passive aggressive and fucking rude. As someone who has no desire to lose weight and someone who does not weigh herself, I would be livid. That is so disrespectful and telling about who he is as a person. Ophi has already spoken about this too, but I agree that just because Blake is not fat doesn't mean she's exempt from fat shaming. Almost every woman has experienced some level of fat shaming, even if they have always been thin. Just like any woman can be slut shamed even if she has never had sex with anyone. You can be the most virgin-y virgin who ever virgined, and if you dress a certain way, if people spread rumors about you, if a picture of you leaks and goes viral, you will be called a slut. I remember in high school hearing two girls slut shame another girl for wearing the same outfit twice in 1 week. That's how I know this is more about the fact that people just don't understand the gravity of people in positions of power making their employees uncomfortable. Making unethical directing decisions like allowing a bunch of random people to enter a scene in which she was to be partially nude. Another quick Google search will tell you that that is incredibly unprofessional. Or body shaming someone who just had a fucking baby and claiming back problems to defend it. Like he's a fucking piece of shit. But no one essayed her, so why is she complaining? That Reddit comment of that person saying they feel people like her are why they weren't believed makes me very sad. Because honey, that's not why. We just don't want to believe victims. But it's comfortable to just blame Blake and not the system. The system that encourages us to despise victims and discard them like trash. If you want a smoking gun, you can read Blake's lawsuit. There are text messages of Justin and his PR team discussing their plan to smear Blake. Both Melissa Nathan and Jennifer Abel are boldly admitting to what they're doing. They're shocked at how easily people are eating up all this negative press and, well, call us out for our willingness to hate on women. If you don't believe that, you are choosing to be ignorant. If you believe Justin's proof over Blake's, it's because you're misogynistic. Why are his texts more legit than hers? People are already pulling out the hits. She must have wanted it. She's exaggerating. It wasn't that bad. She was clearly in love with him and wanted to get revenge. All elements that are intrinsic to rape culture, you're playing directly into its hands and thinking that you're doing something rebellious and radical. Blake Lively did do something very racist, and she probably is racist herself. But that's not why you hate her. You hated her for being a mean girl. But you know on some level that accusation was childish, didn't you? So what do? You found a legitimate wrong that she committed, even if it was over 10 years ago. Even if she wasn't really canceled at the time for doing it. Even if the bulk of your gripes with BL was because of her alcohol and hairline and her apparent rudeness to an interviewer. I don't ever want to excuse racism, even if the person is dealing with bullshit like this, but if you're going to justify the smear campaign against her for being unlikable and racist, may I direct you to a slew of white male celebrities in Hollywood who have a history of being blatantly racist. Tim Burton has always been pretty overtly racist, and his last Beetlejuice movie has a Soul Train scene featuring black people in a way that I really feel like he did that to troll us. Because what the fuck was that? But people still like Tim Burton for the most part. I don't see anyone orchestrating a smear campaign against him. Mel Gibson is still getting roles, I'm pretty sure. Alec Baldwin for a while had no trouble getting work. And if we want to complain about plantation weddings, which we should, there are lots of other celebrities who have gotten married on plantations. Reese Witherspoon and Ryan Phillippe got married on a plantation in 1999. And look, I love Reese, but don't see any hate campaigns lobbied against her. Or him for that matter. Someone on Twitter made a post about this, and the comments this person got are once again illuminating. Not giving her a pat, but at least the Witherspoon is from New Orleans. It's her heritage. The Shaggy blonde did it for funsies. People like Reese, including colleagues. Plus, she is a smart business marketer. Don't bring her into Blake's mess. Don't bring her into this. At least Witherspoon gave us the morning show. What has Lively served lately? I mean, she's a Southern girl, it makes more sense for her. People say J-Lo and Ben, but what's different about theirs is Ben created a replica of a plantation, imitation plantation, instead of getting married on an actual plantation. I honestly can't decide if that's better or worse. Like, what?
I didn't go to college, and that math ain't mathin'.
So being from the South means you have a free pass to be racist? Make that make sense, please. But this is a perfect example of what I mean. We like Reese Witherspoon, and she has given us shows like The Morning Show. So when she does something racist, we can just look past it. Why not? Even if she didn't even bother to issue an apology or donate any money to the NAACP. Like, she hasn't said shit about this. But I promise you, if she ever files a sexual harassment suit against a man, you will probably see people bring this up because then she would be unlikable. So then it would be fine to bring up things that we've already always known. It's funny because Blake Lively is also pretty well liked in the industry. I mean, that might change, but She had a lot of supporters from people in Hollywood when she filed this complaint, and Justin hasn't had any, really. Don't conflate the loudness of hatred on the internet with the idea that Blake Lively is no longer well-liked in the industry she works in. People like to bring up white women's tears when criticizing Blake or Amber Heard, ignoring the fact that Justin is also white, and the fact that that is not what white women's tears is. White women's tears is about the way white women use their white womanness to silence and harm people of color. It is not just something that refers to a white woman claiming harm. Misogyny overcomes Lively's privilege. Despite all evidence to the contrary, people still believe that women have something to gain from accusing men of harassment, because there's a false assumption that women always benefit from making allegations, and accused men always suffer. Allegations are viewed as attacks. Victims who speak up are viewed as mutual perpetrators. In reality, victims always suffer from making workplace sexual harassment allegations, and male perpetrators frequently benefit from being accused. They gain supporters they didn't have before. They receive preferential treatment and are rewarded during judicial processes, and they can reach new heights during future redemption arcs. When victims speak up, they may receive an initial wave of support within the first few days of coming forward. But as the wave recedes, the opposition led by their perpetrator and their enablers ramps up. The victim's allegations are diluted by the perpetrator's campaign. The case begins to appear gray. The perpetrators gain more support as cases progress official decision making. Something the amazing YouTuber Princess Weeks talked about on an episode of the Bechdel cast about Gone Girl is this recent trend of people on the left and the right using white women as a way to do what she calls woke misogyny.
He's being like egotistical and insecure about like his balls and his money because of the cancer. What's not clicking? And what's not clicking is just a resentment towards, how do I put this? I think when it comes to that intersection of like race and gender, I feel like post the 2016 election, once it was released that a number of white women voted for Trump, it became this thing to be able to say, you see how they're really the problem. And all of a sudden, it became an easy way to not talk about race and power and gender and how it intersects, but to make somehow white women the 7-season big bad of culture, to pivot away from white men. And I feel like things like Gone Girl, even though it came out before then, are used to uplift that idea. There is this desire to do woke misogyny by attacking white women de facto for their like white femininity and like historical indictments, while ignoring that it was against people of color and not against white men. You know, it's like, please stop using Black and brown experiences to justify your hatred of white women. But I think that's a part of it, is that like a lot of people dislike white women because of their own power, and they become a symbolic way to attack all women by putting them at the top of the totem pole and then having them be the ones in which she put all that harm toward.
White women still experience oppression. They benefit from white privilege and white supremacy, but white men still rank above them. And it should tell you something about how universal and prevalent sexism is if white women still haven't reached the level of power as most powerful white men, while being the most protected class of women in America. When conversations about the gender pay gaps rolled around social media during the 2010s, people soon began correcting the narrative and pointing out how white women still make more money than women of color. This is something we complain about with white feminism, not understanding intersectionality. If something is bad for white women, it is always 10 times worse for women of color. And any other marginalization you may have adds extra layers of struggle, like being trans or fat or disabled. Ignoring the issues of white women because we don't want to trust them always negatively impacts women of color. Black women have also gotten smeared and have been treated very much the same way white women get treated when they come forward about SARDV against their own. Except with white women, they at least get mainstream attention.
Take Robin Givens. In 1988, she filed for divorce from Mike Tyson because he violently beat her and had a volatile temper. She didn't ask for him to be prosecuted, so you can't say she tried to send a black man to jail. She didn't sue him in civil court for money for abusing her. All she wanted was a divorce and a restraining order. And in order to do that, she cited spousal abuse, so she had to tell her story about her abuse. And for that, a world who had nothing to do with it decided that they hate her, that she must be a gold digger, and thus lying about the abuse the abuser himself did not and could not deny.
No one cares about black women, nor do we really care about non-white DV victims in general. White women who fail to get this receive harsh criticism. Criticism I myself have lobbied in previous videos, but male feminists are rarely called out for being racist as fuck. and only centering the problems of white women. Arguably, Blake has proved to be a slightly better feminist than Justin, not only in being brave enough to come forward against him, but also standing up for other people on set who Justin also allegedly harassed. You can be mad at me, but I believe Justin Baldoni is a creepy sexual harasser. I think he's probably done worse things just based on how much he projects his insecurities. I don't believe he understands feminism or patriarchy. He literally says that the term toxic masculinity has become enmeshed with identity politics, as if he isn't benefiting from that, and then says he doesn't want masculinity to be connected to politics. And say what you want about feminism, but it has always been political. You can't separate politics from feminism. You just can't. He's constantly referencing this Baha'i quote about how there need to be two wings in order for the bird to fly free. It sounds like equality, except when you learn that in the Baha'i religion, women are not allowed to serve on the Universal House of Justice. I don't know what that is, but I just know women aren't allowed to serve on it, and if you're saying you're about gender equality, you're full of shit. That's not equality, but it does explain Justin's feminist politics. He is essentially coding his feminism with light benevolent sexism. You can see it with his fixation on birth, the way his wife talks about gender roles and women being patient and graceful and forgiving. He is okay with empowering women so long as it means the men still get to be empowered. And with Emily, it's not even that subtle. Emily literally makes one of the most infamous conservative tradwife talking points that we know of, and she slyly invokes these ideals in her mom idealizing version of feminism.
A wife and a mother. And her feminine qualities like compassion and nurture and patience were put into the caretaking of family and the home. But then came the 60s. and this allowed us to start businesses, to become politicians, to become leaders. It gave us a lot. It gave us a lot of power. However, it came at a price. Studies say that women have never been so unhappy.
You're allowed to think that my take is wrong, but you don't get to tell me that I'm not allowed to believe Blake. You don't get to tell me that I'm blindly believing her when I actually went and read her entire fucking document and came to the conclusion that she was telling the truth. I don't have to like Blake Lively to believe her, and honestly, I don't think I do. She has a history of saying racist shit, transphobic shit, and those things are inexcusable, but having a history of being bigoted is not correlated to her claiming sexual harassment in an orchestrated smear campaign. However, having a history of being predatory, racist, and weird is correlated to you being sued once again for being inappropriate and abusing your power. I believe Amber Heard too, and I have yet to see a single thing she has ever been in. I know more about her marriage to Johnny Depp than I do about her film career because a likeness or dislike of someone is not going to cloud my judgment, so much that I ignore large amounts of evidence so I can be seen as not part of the crowd. You should ask yourself why you need to like someone to believe them. And also ask yourself, would you want to be treated this way? Would you want people debating about your likability when you come forward as a victim about something? Defending victims and supporting victims has never been a lucrative career choice. It is not something I expect to get loads and loads of praise from. I know what I am risking, but I am willing to risk it because I care about these issues. I care about women. I care about dismantling rape culture. I want to have solidarity with all women, and I care about creating a world where we can be free of patriarchy. You might be tired of hearing about it, but I'm tired of living it. I'm tired of living in a world where my level of likability will be used against me. A world where if someone does something fucked up to me, I have to contemplate whether it's worth standing up for myself, even though people will tell you to do that all the time as if it's not a punishable act. Shaming and blaming victims will not save you. It will not make you look like a better victim, and it will not improve your chances of being believed. If we continue to perpetuate the idea that one must be morally pure and good to be a good and believable victim, no one can be a true victim. Likability is a trap, especially for marginalized people. Especially for women. Even if you think so many people think you are likable, there will come a point where you do something that might completely change their perception of you. And that perception will involve seeing you as someone who could be victimized. Is there a such thing as a likable woman? Can you think of one? And if she exists, could she be anything but the ultimate manifestation of everything we hate about the water waste women? Everything we're forced to be? Likability in a sexist, racist culture is not objective. It's compulsory femininity. The gender binary, invisible labor, whiteness, smallness, sweetness. It's letting them do it. If someone is universally likable, I don't trust that person. That's the opposite of politics. I don't want a candidate that the alt-right likes. I don't want to have anything in common with George Zimmerman. A person's standard of likability is a reflection of his beliefs, and unfortunately in this country, a whole lot of people believe that Donald Trump is not a racist shirt and an 8-foot tie who is unqualified for literally every job except lie down. So no. Excuse me. We will not play likability anymore. It's an endless runner, a game with no progress and no finish line that women are expected to chase, that keeps us from doing the real work, accruing the real power. Chasing likability has been one of women's biggest setbacks by design. I don't think that rejecting likability will get us anywhere, but I know that embracing it has gotten us nowhere, and it will continue to get us nowhere. To the people who complain that the real victims are hindered by people like Blake Lively or Amber Heard, I want you to know that there will never be a likable enough victim that will meet your standards if this is how you think. There is no such thing as an innocent victim. There is no such thing as a perfect victim or a perfect anything. You are never going to find that person, because that person could be you. And sorry to break it to you, but you are probably not as likable as you think you are. I think people unconsciously know this, and they know that if they harass people who they feel are unlikable victims, it will make them look better by default. We can get on our high horses and judge Blake Lively for the way she promoted It Ends With Us, because, well, she's a mean girl, and I'm not. I'm a good person because I'm judging the way she's handling domestic violence. This isn't misogyny. Meanwhile, half the people doing that were just 2 years before mocking a woman's domestic violence testimony, mocking her and memeing her crying faces and making light of domestic violence. It was never about domestic violence because it is never about domestic violence. We do not care about domestic violence. What we do care about is tending to our hatred of women. We never stopped hating women, and maybe I'm just being pessimistic, but we probably never will. Because of course there will always be a woman who we feel deserves to be punished. There will always be a woman placed between the public crosshairs who reminds you of the girl who bullied you in middle school, or who you think talks like a liar, or who did the one thing by which your personal moral compass cannot abide. If she ever gets absolved of her crimes, there will be another worse woman waiting to be next. And despite what their dehumanization campaigns try to tell you, these women will not be so different from you. Part of the psycho horror of womanhood is the ultimate truth that there will always be someone for whom you seem too cruel, too manipulative, too sexual, too angry, too whorish, too morally impure. There will always be someone who looks at the way you move your lips and sees evidence that you are a monster. There will always be someone who hears your voice and thinks it proves that you deserve pain and suffering. There is no level of purity you can reach that will make you too good to be punished unless we resist the urge to punish at all. Virtue is a commodity that is hoarded by those with power, and it can and will be taken from you. The cycle of seeking and destroying imperfect women one by one is a merry-go-round that seemingly never stops spinning. We have to make the choice to step off.
I feel like if I could distill one thing in the population to take away from all of this, is that in an abusive relationship, there is a perpetrator and a victim. Like, regardless of whether you like either of those individuals, one of them is a victim and one of them is a perpetrator. And you cannot like Amber Heard while still acknowledging that she's a victim. And in fact, if you don't, if instead you retreat to this position that many people view as neutral, which is that they're both bad, that's actually not a neutral position. That helps Johnny Depp because that's the argument that he is trying to make, is like, my behavior is excused because of her behavior.
Right.
And so when we view both of them as bad, we're ensuring that the cycle of abuse will be perpetuated. And so that's what I would want people to take away from this, is like, they're not both bad. You don't have to support them. You don't have to talk about it. You don't have to make it a focal point of your life. But don't look at abusive situations as like, oh, everybody involved is culpable. Because there always is a victim.
And the victim is Amber Heard.
And the victim is Amber Heard.